We will just make it live. And we're live, people. We'll do it live. How are we, everybody? Welcome back to CoCo Talk. This is CoCo Talk number 11. As always, I'm surrounded by a bevy of beauties, including Nick Morentis, David Ladd, John Strong, Bruce Moore, Richard Lorbieski, Curtis Boyle, Bill Noble, Barry Nelson, and Richard Cavell are all here. We might have a few people join along the way randomly. We might have a few people fall off out of boredom. You just never know. So we're back for another week. A lot of cool things have happened this week in the world of color computer. The CoCo Crew Podcast dropped this week. Another great episode of the CoCo Crew Podcast. Yay, CoCo Crew. Lots of things going on in the Facebook group. Lots of things going on the CoCo mailing list, and so on and so forth. So hello, everybody. How are we? Hello to my distinguished panel.
Hello, hello.
Good night.
Hello.
And have you guys have you guys had a great week this week?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I've had a pretty good one myself.
And did you have a CoCo week at all this week? Did you do anything CoCo this week?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Curtis is using his optimized compiled responses here.
Why?
So yeah.
Hey, you could be using a soundboard and spitting out the response by pressing a button.
Hey Siri, tell David to shut up.
Siri, send off a DDoS to David Ladd. It's been a good week. I actually started doing a little bit of blogging yesterday. I got back into trying to work on some of my font coding. Got that tweaked. I actually wanted to record a video showing off the latest progress, and now I'm running into VCC issues. So once again, the universe is screwing with me and not letting me do something I want to do. I'm so used to the universe having it in for me, and somehow I'm still here, and the universe is still there too. We'll find a way to make peace one of these days. But I just
What's the VCC issue you're having?
I don't get me started right now. I just it's just I don't know, some weird back buffer memory error. I put a screenshot on Facebook. I put a message in the mailing list. I don't know. It's started getting me this weird error message when David showed me how to connect it to VCC, and I can't get rid of the weird error message now. And the problem is, if I try to move VCC to a different window on my other monitor, the screen freezes and it doesn't work. So it's just something odd. I've uninstalled it, reinstalled it. I've moved it to a different folder, thinking maybe I had bad config files. I've got a clean config, same issue. So now it's just, I don't know. VCC doesn't like me today, and it just really screwed up my plans to record a video. So I'm gonna have to change everything to record differently, which is just a project. But whatever. That's enough of my venting. Aside from VCC giving me these issues. Yes, I'll get there. Yeah, I'm having a problem with MAME now too, because I don't know how to save in MAME, because when I open up a floppy disk in MAME wants to open it as read-only. So I don't know how to get MAME to save to a floppy disk, and maybe you guys can help me out there.
Yep.
Is anybody working with that? Saving stuff in MAME disk images?
I have contributed to the MAME driver for the color computer a few times.
Mm-hmm.
I compile and maintain the MAME build for the Mac OS X, and I have pretty good knowledge of MAME, so I should be able to help you out there.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, and I know the MAME is getting ready to be re-released again with the speech sound pack update, so hopefully something, my whole thing is I don't want to have to find strain XYZ of this fork off of this branch on this dead end road to get a program that works. I would just like crap to work. You know what I mean? And I know I'm being a little bit snarky here, but I'm not technical. I'm not a compiler. I don't feel I should have to compile a program for it to work and just do its job. And maybe I'm just being a bitch. Who knows? But
well, I think Nick and I would agree with you on that.
I'm in a crappy mood. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I generally have to,
wait, Curtis, what are you agreeing with?
And this is one of the reasons why I took to maintaining my own build of MAME for the Mac OS X.
Yeah.
Because I found that MAME would go, features would go in and out of regression as far as working or not working.
Yeah.
So what I do is I find one that's stable, I build it, and then I post it on Tim Linder's website for Mac OS X. So, and then, I'll test it thoroughly, I'll go through like there's a couple dozen systems I go through and I do regression testing, if there's minor bugs, I'll go and fix the bugs, then redo it, and then redo it. And then I'll finally post a binary for Mac OS X, which I redo like once every year to 6 months. I'll go and release another one. So
I mean, it's nice that you do that, and I guess it's a double-edged, it's a two-sided coin. It's on the one hand, you could say maybe it's unfortunate or just frustrating that you have to go through those steps. But on the other side of that same coin, MAME is a big picture, and so it's because of the size and scope of MAME and MES. I understand some of the reasons why, but I have always enjoyed VCC for what I was doing because it just worked for what I needed. And now that it's not working, I'm just frustrated, so I'm venting and I'm taking it out on the world right now. So I apologize.
It would be nice if we had somebody. I've always said this. The MAME group, all they do is they're constantly in development mode. There is no release branch. Okay. What I've done is I've created a release branch for Mac OS X. It'd be nice if we had somebody else that would do a release branch of MAME for Windows, let's say. So, and do the same sort of thing I do. Build it, test it, retest it, get it to a point, get one of the releases, the version numbers that's working and stable. Might not have, the latest, greatest, updates, but it's a stable release and they can post the binary somewhere.
Right, like the CoCo MAME, the one that's just been proven to work for what we need it for the CoCo, as opposed to every single machine on the planet.
Well, I think having it tested for some of the more popular machines that in addition, I don't just have a CoCo. I have an Atari 800, a Commodore 64, a couple other machines. Yeah, and it'd be good to have it tested for like a few dozen of the more popular machines that people are constantly using.
Right. All right, but let's move on from that. Now, I appreciate that. Maybe we'll bring that topic up later, but I want to get into, well, it's still related to MAME. So now that we're talking about MAME, let's talk about the announcement that Tim Linder posted to both the mailing list and to the Facebook group that the speech and sound cartridge, or the speech sound pack, or the SSC, whatever you want to call it, that device is now emulated to work with MAME with a multi-pack interface and will be bundled into the next release. I forgot the version number of that, but the short story of that announcement is that we now have an emulated version of the speech and sound pack, and that's pretty awesome for anybody who knows what that means, and we'll get into that in a minute. But yeah, that's the lead story that I want to run with.
It's the first time the speech and sound pack has ever been emulated.
It is. This is
on any emulator. Yeah.
This is the first time in history that something like this has happened, and to me, I think it's a crowning achievement, only because of the fact that it's been 35 years and it hasn't happened yet. It just happened, and I didn't understand the intricacies of that card when I first asked those questions, because I kept thinking, well, man, we can emulate the CoCo. Other people can emulate sound chips on MAME and things like that. Why can't we just emulate the speech sound cartridge? And it turns out the main reason probably is the little middleware chip that's between the sound hardware and the CoCo. What is that called? A PIC, Programmable Interrupt Controller, or something like that?
Yeah, it's almost a computer in its own right.
Yeah, so there's a device inside the speech sound card that makes it proprietary, and for whatever reason, that device, that PIC controller, whatever it's called, that has been the hurdle to get this thing emulated, because somebody would have to reverse engineer that, and it's a proprietary thing. And I guess it's finally happened. And so I'm glad that it's happened, because I'd like to go back and record a bunch of videos I did on Speech Sound Pack, like through MAME now, just to get a better quality picture, nice clean picture. Curtis and Nick and I did a showcase on speech sound stuff like a year ago. And I had to do this whole ghetto recording setup where I had to have my microphone on and the speakers on my TV, and so they could hear what was happening, and there was a lot of echo and things like that. So it just caused me to have to lower my production value to make that video. I'd love to go back and make that video again, just nice and clean and pristine, and maybe add on to it and just, talk about the fact that we can now emulate it and everything else. It's a pretty cool achievement. At the end of the day, what we discovered with the Speech Sound Pack was, as good as it is and as cool of an idea as it is, there was really only about 2 games that really took advantage of music on it, and the rest of them just added speech. And 35 years later, just that lame robot voice in a game just doesn't do anything for me. So that's not a huge wow factor today. You know, it was kind of cool back then, but I'm sorry, were you just?
I was just saying it's neat to listen to. I mean, you know.
It is, but it's not as cool as having multi-voice music or sound effects. You know, it's just the same voice over and over again. Yeah. Ron Klein's just here. Ron Klein says, I wish I could stay, but I need to leave soon. I've uploaded a Windows 64-bit version of MAME 0-187 pre-release from Git to Facebook. I've got uploaded to a couple of disk images and test SSC as well as the sample command line to launch MAME using the CoCo 2 driver with SSC support. So Ron Klein says he just uploaded that to Facebook. So I'm not sure how I'm going to be able to get that from Facebook, but I'll try that right now. Thank you, Ron Klein, for doing that, by the way. Let me try switching over to Facebook right now. But yeah, the speech sound cartridge was Tandy's attempt at doing what like John Strong and John Linville are doing now, which is, okay, so here's a couple of files here that Ron Klein just downloaded. So let's go to download. And I'm going to just download this to my desktop for right now because I'm not sure what's... you know what? This is going to be too much of a project for me to try to do while we're live streaming this. Unfortunately, if we had more time to prepare and test and figure it out, we'll do that. So on that same subject, though, I spoke to Tim Lindner this morning. And Tim is wanting to talk about this too, but Tim's not available until tomorrow. And so we're going to figure out some time where we can get back together with Tim, and then depending on when he gets back to me tonight, we can either do another live stream or maybe we'll just pre-record it, and it'll be a kind of interview/review of, because Tim wants to show us how to compile MAME, he wants to show us how to set this up, and he also wants to show off the whole speech sound pack. So it's probably best maybe to do it with Tim, and we can pre-stage and pre-test what the thing is going to look like before we go live or before we record it. I'm going to just fluster cluck my way through trying to set this up right now, and I don't want to try to do that while we're going live. But Ron's saying the version of MAME I compiled is only for legacy MES drivers only. If you want the full version with MAME, which includes arcade support too, you can grab the regular binary. Okay, so he's already starting to lose me.
What he's saying here, he said MAME has been merged. MAME and MES were merged. MES is an emulator that used to be a separate branch. It was part of MAME, but only emulated computer systems,
right?
Computers.
And home consoles, yeah.
Yes.
And some home consoles, right? So MAME also emulates all of the coin-operated arcade machines.
Right. Yeah.
So
yeah. I'm aware of that. Yeah.
Right. So he's saying that the build that he did, he only built the home computers and the consoles, and not the arcade machines into his build.
Okay. Right.
So it's a stripped-down version. So it doesn't have, for instance. Doesn't have the stand-up arcade Pac-Man.
Right. And that almost sounds like that would make more sense for what we would need it for, and that might be what. And so by the same note, so Ron Klein is the person who has made the CoCo Pi, which is the Raspberry Pi packaging that has optimized CoCo emulation, which I believe is all based off of MAME/MES. And so Ron has also said that the next update of MAME that will also be updated in the CoCo Pi image will now support this natively too, so it'll become a little bit less of a configuration issue for somebody who's maybe not as technical. I actually do want to learn it out of curiosity, but I'm also, I'm somewhat technical, but I'm more lazy than I am technical, and I would just like to be able to double click something and have it work and not have to do a command line and mount this and add this and slash that and plus this and ampersand that. I'm a big fan of just click and go, and I know when you're dealing with kind of retro tech, sometimes you have to be a little bit more technical than that, but I'm lazy. I want it easy. I want my entertainment spoon fed to me.
The MAME Windows build and the one for Mac also. Mac has a build that interfaces with what's called SDL. I forget what that stands for, but something like Simple Direct Media Layer or something like that. But it's a user interface similar to DirectX. Okay. SDL also operates on Windows. I believe the MAME for Windows also has a Windows user interface that it can build and that it can get that will run. But even with the SDL layer, when you run MAME these days, it actually comes up with a user interface.
Yeah.
And if you know a couple key presses, you can get to the menus and you can mount and unmount floppies and do all that stuff with the thing running without touching the command line.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing now with limited success.
Barry helped me get that last night, actually.
Yeah, like I think in mine I have to press scroll lock to go from full keyboard emulation to partial emulation. Then I can press tab, bring up a menu. Yeah, I mean, that part I'm used to. But again, like it would be nice if I could just double click the CoCo from the first menu and it automatically has speech sound pack built into it and I can just load a disc and go. That's where I'd like to see it end up.
Once you set configuration, MAME remembers the configuration. So I think you might have to program it to run with a command line option write config in the shortcut that you run.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so it writes the config back. But if you put that, which by the way on my app that I build for Macintosh, I make that as the default. Okay, so now if you run it with a write config on your that minus write config, and then you run it, when you change a configuration in, for instance, the Color Computer or any system that you're running, when you exit that system, it saves all of your settings, what disks you had mounted, what packs you plugged into the multi-pack, all that stuff gets saved. So next time you launch it, it comes back even with the same floppy disks mounted. Okay,
well that's good.
I still think they need to go back and put in a real GUI though. Like if you looked at MAME back in probably about the 0.6, 0.7 era, it had a full GUI, just like VCC or something. You could just select things nice and easy just with the mouse. And I really think they need to put that back in at some point.
I mean, there are third-party ones too.
I built a GUI for the earlier. I built a GUI for the earlier MAME on the Mac that was built in TCL/TK, and I maintained that for a while. But I don't know if you've used MAME recently, but the GUI interface that is built into MAME has progressed quite a bit.
Yeah.
To the point where I've decided that I am not going to. I'm going to try and enhance the GUI interface now that's in MAME. Set defaults that are reasonable, etc. on my Mac build, rather than maintaining a separate TCL/TK front end that I had built previously.
That's cool. That'd be good progress. So Ron Klein said something to the point where he said, it says, I would be happy to join another chat soon and do this as a live show for everyone to see. I don't know if you're talking about today, Ron, but if you're able, you're going to probably need to add me as a Skype contact. If we're not already Skype contacts, then we would get you in on Skype and you could do a screen share. We would love to have that. I know it's kind of last minute. But yeah, if you could get that going today, Ron, that would be great. If not, I'm going to plan something tomorrow with Tim Lindner, to be determined on the time. And if you want to maybe join that one, either way, that would be kind of cool. Sorry about that. So I don't want to get too deep into the nuts and bolts of how MAME works and how MAME doesn't work right now. I'd rather just kind of focus on the celebration of the fact right now that we have this speech sound pack emulation, which is great, and I can't wait to try it, and we'll definitely show it off, and hopefully either tomorrow or by next week's CoCo Talk, we'll have a full proper demonstration of it. It's still new. It's literally late-breaking, groundbreaking stuff. But yeah, the speech sound pack was a really neat peripheral accessory for the Color Computer that I don't think ever truly lived up to its full potential. But it did add music. It did add music, sound effects, and synthesized voice to the CoCo, giving it what it never had.
There are a few games, as you said, that use it to produce music. I've dabbled with programming on it a little bit because I actually have a speech sound pack, so I've been able to futz with it for many years now. And it's definitely true that it had much more potential than it was ever used for. You know,
Go ahead. It never worked on a CoCo 3 without mod.
Yeah, that's a big problem. It doesn't work at double speed.
Oh, okay.
Actually,
without hardware modifications.
It works fine. I have an unmodified speech sound pack. I have used it for many years on my CoCo 3.
If you're running single speed, yes.
Yeah, single speed, yes, but double speed, it gets a little quirky.
Yes, but the thing is, what I've done, rather than modify my speech sound pack, which I may modify it now because they've come out with another simpler modification of just changing a capacitor rather than changing one of the transistors in the pack. It changes the value of the capacitor. It makes it work correctly on both double speed and single speed mode. at least within some degree, because it still double clocks it. But I changed the driver, for instance, in OS 9, so that while it's doing critical operations with the pack, it slowed down to single speed mode, and then sped back up when it was done addressing the pack.
Yeah, that's what I had done too. That just it's a pain, and it shouldn't have been necessary to do that.
Seems like the CoCo has had a history of needing some type of hack job somewhere or another.
There was always one.
I should mention with the speech sound pack drivers being released for MAME, one thing I'm hoping, like a lot of people back in the day didn't develop for it because you needed a multi-pack and the speech sound pack to program for it with a disk drive. I mean, you didn't want to do off cassette. So I'm hoping now that MAME and MES have it, that more people will fiddle with it, and maybe we'll get some new games and stuff that actually support it, because you can test it now without having to set up a pack and all this other crap.
Right.
Well, that's exactly it, Curtis. That's the whole reason why I actually, once I noticed that it was around, I downloaded it right away and I compiled it just to actually have that speech sound pack.
That's awesome. Yep. That's awesome. Which means that it could end up in something like the FPGA project, or the CoCo Deck Nano, could end up in other emulators. It could even be hardware cloned down the road, possibly. So,
in actuality, the AY chip that's in the Sound Speech Pack is already emulated on FPGAs.
Gotcha. Like I think
already is just getting that SP, what is it, 0256 voice chip to actually get going on the FPGAs.
Nice. Okay, sorry, John Strong. Go ahead.
The other big issue, there's two big issues back in the day, okay, with it, is one, the cost. And the cost on it never really came down. So having it in the emulator does eliminate that issue. The other issue was programming it in the response time. And it was a pain in the neck to program with the sound and such.
Mm-hmm.
I found it somewhat awkward, but it's certainly doable.
Well, nobody said it wasn't doable, and it's been done. It just, back in the day, you had those two issues. Do I mess with this thing? It's a pain in the neck. Where, two, it's so expensive, very few people have it. Therefore, it's kind of the chicken and egg. Do I do the time for it? And nobody be able to use it.
Ron Klein Jr. is logging in.
So there's...
Yeah, the initial price of it was certainly an entry-level barrier.
Well, then you needed a multi-pack, too, if you wanted to run any disc-based games with it.
Exactly, yeah.
And so it was one of those things that was rarely used because of those issues. And it's not that issues cannot be worked around. We have games that did work around it. But
after I got Buana working, I surprised myself that, hey, I got it working on my CoCo 3. I never run it on my CoCo 3. And it's like, oh, it's using my speech sound pack.
Yeah.
And it actually plays music out of it. That surprised me. I'm like, oh, okay.
So, kind of the point I wanted to make, and we it's already been hinted at, is with the AY series type chips, the Yamaha, the AY, and also the TI chips that we're talking about putting in the game cartridges, is those are actually probably a better choice today, unless you need the speech and for forced use. And also, especially AY series chip, those were available back in the day. There were carts. I never had one. They were too expensive, but they existed. It's just not Radio Shack brand.
Right.
So,
Ron, are you pressed for time? Because we got Ron Klein joining us right now. Have you got time, Ron? I can't hear you, Ron.
Oh, we got no audio.
No sound, Ron.
Oh dear.
It's 1 second. Okay. All right. I just wasn't sure because he had alluded something in the text chat that he might be short on time today. And Steve Bosco just joined us. Steve Bamford. Hey, Bosco. How are you? Welcome. So there were a variety of reasons why you could say it didn't get used more in the past. The cost, the complexity, things like that. Yeah, I remember reading about this in the Boise and Bill book where they were going to possibly build the speech sound pack into the deluxe color computer. That would have been interesting. And I guess what happened with the CoCo 3 was people figured out a good enough way to make music to not depend on that hardware. And it became less, quote unquote, necessary. But it's still a piece of CoCo history, and even if nobody develops anything new for it ever, still can't hear you, Ron. It's just kind of nice now that we can capture and preserve that technology and enjoy some of those programs that took advantage of it through MAME, and then hopefully in the future through other platforms.
Definitely.
I think if we program it into something like the FPGA, it'd be a good thing to have, compatibility with the legacy speech sound pack for the games that support it, and then maybe a bypass or shortcut or turbo mode for modern games to use it without jumping through all of the hoops.
Yeah, that might be cool. Yeah, that's a great utopian solution right there. That it has all the strict hardware compatibility for legacy products, and then a fast-track way to bypass the stupid chip and make new software that just talks straight to the hardware. That's, again, and I think we've got people smart enough to make that happen. I'm not on that list. Whenever you make a list and smart's on the top of it, my name will never make that list.
I know one person that might be able to do it.
Yeah, well, let's
something else go on right now.
Alexander Wallace has just joined us. Viva Mexico. Hello, Alexander. How are you? Hola. All right, well, let's move on past that. We will revisit that when we have time to demonstrate it better, and that might be today, might be tomorrow. It will be in the near future, so we'll move on to another topic. And since we have, well, maybe not. Here's Ron Klein again. This just in, live via satellite, everybody. Ron Klein. Ron Klein, do you read us?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Ron.
Now.
Jeez.
Ed Snyder has just joined us, too.
For the audio. Let me put the video back on here.
All right.
I don't scare anybody away, but...
no.
I got just a little bit of time. I figured I would hop on real quick and just answer a couple questions. It sounds like you're going to do something later tonight. I might be able to join. If not, tomorrow sounds pretty good. Just give me a time.
It'll be tomorrow, with Tim sometime.
Okay. Yeah, the version of MAME I compiled, like I said, it's just for the MES support. It's working very well. I just was messing with it before I uploaded it. So it's for Windows only. If anyone wants a Linux version, I can try to do a compile for 64-bit Linux. My distribution right now is Linux Mint, but I might be able to do it for others to do.
No, it's cool though. It's very cool that this is coming, and this will be in the next release of the CoCo Pi, right?
Yeah, actually, I have it running on the CoCo Pi right now. The only thing we're having an issue with is there's a little bit of audio feedback. I'm not exactly sure why. I've talked to Tim about it. We're looking into it. I'm using the analog audio out of the Raspberry Pi 3 because my Raspberry Pi is plugged into a VGA monitor.
Okay.
I did try it through HDMI, which would use the digital audio, and I'm still getting the same feedback. So the speech and sound cartridge works. It works great. It's just that feedback's annoying, so we're trying to figure out why.
Okay, that's cool. That sounds like something minor, and it sounds like you've already got 4 out of the 5 steps in the right direction taken care of. So it's pretty freaking awesome. It really is to me. I'm a gaming geek, so for me this is like, this is hallelujah, to hear this kind of stuff. And 90% of the people might say, well, who cares? What are you talking about? Whatever, move on. But for me, this is awesome. And I think any true CoCo hardware fan should appreciate, even if you didn't play the games, even if you don't care what the music sounds like, we should appreciate the fact that this is a major accomplishment to emulate this very unique piece of hardware.
It is. I'm glad to see it as well. I would like to see some other hardware make it into MAME or maybe the other emulators as well. The thing is, some of the newer stuff coming out wasn't part of the old legacy CoCo world, so I don't know where you draw the line with, are we going to emulate new hardware for the old CoCo? I'm kind of hoping we do. There's some neat sound devices coming out that may be beneficial, especially from a development standpoint. So we'll see what happens, but this is a good step to have this cartridge emulated now.
Yeah,
I definitely agree. I think that as far as which ones we should emulate, we maybe look at which ones would serve a useful function on emulator. Because, for instance, there's not a whole lot of point of emulating a CoCo SDC on an emulator because you've already got the functionality with the virtual disks and whatnot. And the CoCo Flash really is designed to replace multiple cartridges, and you can do virtual cartridges on an emulator. Something like the sound chips that are coming out add functionality to both the emulator and the physical platform, and I think we should add them to the emulator as options so that we can run that software.
Yeah, and I think John Linville mentioned that in the most recent podcast, that there is a way to emulate his hardware on his sound chip, and then John Strong can talk about his, but it sounds like that is an option. So because these are quote-unquote over-the-counter pieces of hardware that probably already exist in MAME, I think that option is there, so people could develop and test for the super card.
That, Steve.
Yeah.
So I think I've seen in the source code the actual chips themselves are listed there, but whether they're actually interfaced to the CoCo or not is another story.
Right, but I'm pretty sure that John Strong. I'm sorry, John Strong. At least I'm remembering your name, John Strong. But I'm pretty sure John Linville mentioned that this on episode 24, that there is a way to emulate his, we'll call it his super pack with the sound and bank switch ROM and everything else. So, and if that's true, which I believe it is, because my memory's bad, but it's not that bad. That means anybody who wants to develop for a cartridge, our next topic, can try that through emulation first before you go through, pressing out hardware chips and things like that, which is cool stuff. So, to me, this is a great week for CoCo.
The biggest thing there is actually going to be not the sound chips, which already there is emulation written in MAME to handle those and just needs to be linked to the color computer. But the bank switched ROM is actually more of an issue because right now the color computer does not have under MAME emulation for the bank switch cartridges, which is something I've been thinking about adding from time to time but haven't gotten around to it yet. So cartridges existing like RoboCop and Predator and whatnot that use bank switching do not run under either VCC or MAME emulation.
Barry, that's interesting because one of the things that I've been talking to some developers on the side is, I run Phuzix on the CoCo 3. Brett's done a lot of good work with that for the CoCo 3 port, but there is a CoCo 2 and Dragon port that Tormod has, and one of the things that he developed, I'm not sure how old it is, he's got what he calls a Sphinx 512 board. It's a cartridge that plugs into the CoCo 2 or the Dragon and provides an additional 512K of banked RAM along with an SD card slot. So from a Phuzix standpoint, it really makes the CoCo 2 and Dragon platform much more usable. One of the things I was hoping to see is a way to virtualize that, to provide that cartridge support for a CoCo 2. So what you're saying may be something that they're going to have to overcome if they do provide that support to run Phuzix on that platform. And then that, when you start looking at that, I'm also very interested in the CoCo VGA that Brendan's doing. Some of the new text modes and things like that, you wonder if that'll ever make it into emulation for the CoCo 2. So there's a lot of neat things that I would like to see virtualized as well. Again, more to help from a development standpoint. I don't know.
I have to agree with that. I mean, I've been using MAME lately because of its debugger, and it's wonderful to have that. I mean, you can set watch points and break points and have memory dumps of different chunks of memory at the same time, as well as a disassembly of code and interrupts and everything else. It's quite handy in debugging.
Yeah, no, and that's exactly it. If we're going to develop software for some of this new hardware, it's nice to have that debugger. That really, you keep exactly on what is so great about MAME is that debugger. It's fantastic. I'm not even a developer for MAME, but I've used it to help troubleshoot, and it's great. So
it needs to become more MMU aware and task register aware. That's about the only complaint I have about it.
I think Richard just joined us. Richard, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there.
All right. And so how is the tornado that you're in right now? Is it good? Live from
he's
the
watching his roof fly by.
Live from the Storm Weather Center. Coming in. So yeah, it's a great day in CoCo history when we can have this, and we right now it's a lot of talk, and for anybody who doesn't quite follow some of what we're saying, we will find a way to demonstrate this for you soon, possibly even tomorrow, so you can hear what we're talking about, and I look forward to that. So let's transition now into the topic of cartridges, which has been a pretty good thread of activity this week on Facebook and everything else, and maybe a few feathers were ruffled in the process. I don't think any of them were meant to be ruffled, but I think it started off as harmlessly enough where when Nick Morentis' blog about Chapter 2 of Gunstar was there, and I think John Linville started off by saying, well, this would be really cool to see on a cartridge, and it kind of started from there, and then it just got into lots of discussions, which I believe all were of positive intent, but maybe sometime along the way somebody said, well, I don't care about cartridge, I'd rather do it this way, and some people would say, well, was there a problem with this? And I don't think any of that was meant, but I think it's a great topic, and I'm just going to speak from my perspective first. I would love to have as many things on a cartridge as possible, being a consumer and a collector, because I think it's a cool thing. And I would be happy to pay for not only the cartridge edition, but a floppy edition and a virtual floppy edition. And, I do have a little bit of disposable income. I'm not trying to brag, but, to me, there could not be enough versions of new CoCo products. And maybe I'm in the minority. And I do know there are a lot of other developmental challenges and production challenges and upfront expenses and things like that. But it's a great topic. We have John Strong here, who is producing his own cartridges and has some firsthand experience on this. That's where we'll start is, if you're making a new game, and John Linville talked about this last month and this month. What are the reasons to put a game on a cartridge? What are some of the benefits? There are certain things where, it loads in instantly. It loads automatically. There's some certain things that will run faster, et cetera, et cetera. There are certain pros, but there are certain cons. And so that's where we're going to start in with that. So just go around the room and people talk about what your thoughts are on either purchasing a cartridge, developing for a cartridge, producing a cartridge, whatever you want to say when it comes to that.
I guess if it's possible, since I mentioned I could lead off.
Go ahead.
Okay. Actually, the first stuff I produced that would actually considered to be in a cartridge was way back in the day. And I did a terminal that plugged into the RS-232 pack, so we could use it on a multiple user CoCo system used in the classroom, a math classroom. And so, in fact, it'd been so long ago I'd forgotten I had done that until I was working on the game cartridges. And I had watched some interest with John Linville's experiments with molding cases and so on. And, I even toyed the idea with, making one just to do it. But really wasn't worthwhile to produce with that. However, John Linville did make a challenge a couple years ago in the 4K contest that he had ROM cartridge entry, and he challenged somebody else to matching. So I did so as far as I created a little breakout game for the rental cartridge just for the 4K contest. And so that was kind of my entry back into making the cartridge. Cartridge always been kind of a cool idea. It was nice until you got to floppy drives. So I like both of them. Okay. I like the cartridge. The fact it's quick, it's easy. You know what they've got. It's plugged in. It's going to run. But I ran into the issue recently. We had somebody that just knew back into the color computer saying who ordered some of my software. And, I made it clear in the emails that, hey, someone came on CD disc. And in fact, when he came back, oh, my fault. How do I get it copied over here? How do I use it? Well, there's a lot of us that's second nature. We're going to use the CoCo SDC. or some other alternative or drive wire, and I had to start pointing him to the right places to be able to use it. So it's nice to have something that you can ship out to somebody, they plug it in, and it just works.
And actually, I have to agree with you on that, John.
And so that's really nice.
They last forever.
Yeah. On the flip side, it's really easy to make your change on your SD, on your CD stuff. You got less limitations. Using a disk-based system or CoCo SDC. Though a lot of those limitations can be eliminated on the cartridge. And actually this week I've got something in. I was looking at another project actually for my nephew. And there's something he wants to do with some electronics. And I ordered something in and I got thinking, hey, wait a minute. Can we use that with the CoCo? And so
God bless you.
Can I cram it in my CoCo?
Well, it'd be, and it might possibly be a way to share game saves.
Oh, that's cool. That's one of the challenges. Yeah.
Across things, I have to see what the actual capability of the items is. Okay, I'm looking at actually RFID tags. Okay, are sometimes commonly called NFC, near field communication.
Cool.
And so one of the things while I set this up and work on the idea for my nephew, and the background on that, he's a jeweler who designs jewelry, and he's wanting to put RFID tags in some of his jewelry so people could just scan it with an Android phone or something and go to a website and get more information or share it and things like that. And so that's what started the idea. But actually RFID tags is used widely in gaming right now. Nintendo, the Emulation series stuff.
Oh yeah. That's cool.
And those are basically just RFID tags. Okay.
Interesting.
And you look out there, and they've hacked that all over the place.
Right.
And so you don't have to buy the figurines or anything at this time if you want to be able to play with the stuff. You can find the hacked data and burn it in.
Oh wow, it's like counterfeit credit cards at this point. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. But the couple things I'm looking at is, and this just came to me the other night, so I haven't had time to do the research yet, just how much data I can store on there. And if it's going to be big enough to do a game save or a character save. The concept is, and I wasn't going to talk about this, and I am, and so I'm going to get accused of vaporware and things, but this is just a kind of a venture idea is what can be done, experiment at this time. And, do I have enough data on there that I can say if I have a game that you build up with characters, take something like any of the role-playing games where you build up your characters and
sure,
something like that, and be able to take a card and go to your friends and boom, with your friends, be able to load in that character and that play.
That would be cool. That's very cool.
The concept is good. It can work. Whether it requires a whole infrastructure for the CoCo, and whether that's going to be worth messing with and ideas or not. It's just one of those multiple crazy, time-consuming ideas. I get.
You know what I wish I could do, and you're not going to want to hear this, but every time I hear how you guys have all these great ideas and all the things you're thinking about, I wish I could be like one of these big villains from the movies where you grab up all these scientists and you just chain them up and you make them produce things, or they won't be able to see their family, one of these type of things, where I'm just going to make you guys all prisoners and force you to produce this crap, and it's just like you want these things, and when are you going to have have time to make them all. You know, and
Steve,
like,
Steve, you can help him with that. Just pay him a full-time wage. Then he can quit his regular job and go ahead.
You know, you hear about this all the time, like the scientists that get kidnapped for their knowledge to help the villains produce the next bomb and stuff. And it's just like, dude, let's get all these great minds together and get them to crank out CoCo stuff 24/7.
You can be the CoCo Nazi, Steve.
Like I said, this is very first stage. I just ordered this stuff, for the project for my nephew.
Yeah.
And if he actually does this part, it could be a profitable venture for us because he's good.
Right. Well, let's reel it back in a little bit from getting off to what could happen later to let's just focus on the cartridges that we can make now. And I really want to hear from Nick Marentis on this because he's already got a game and he's got a new game in development. One of the things that comes to mind, Nick, is, I don't know enough about how Popstar Pilot works and how it loads its data off of the disk because I know you've got a bunch of different files that pull in. But how hard would it be, just as an experiment, to convert the disk-based version of Popstar to load everything from parts of the cartridge either being in bank switch memory locations or something like that? It's just kind of a proof of concept that once you've developed it, now we can port it to run off of this thing here. And is that something that you can even conceive as being feasible, or is it not worth the effort when it's already done? Or
good question.
Yeah, it definitely can be done. It's whatever cartridge you end up using to put say Popstar Pilot on it, it's going to be a cartridge that's going to support bank selection. Mm-hmm. So yeah, just have to, whatever scheme it uses, just use that to load the appropriate blocks of memory to wherever they're meant to be. Not much different to disk. Now, it's just that on disk it's easy to do because, well, it's fully supported by BASIC. You can. Mm-hmm. I just use the BASIC program. You load the BASIC program and then it loads the rest. There's no fancy hardware needed to do bank selecting and shuffle things around. It's very easy to do in BASIC. But yeah, you can still do it on a cartridge. It all depends on the cartridge's method of bank selection.
Okay.
I think the difference comes in when you start seeing cartridges that have built-in additional features like a sound chip.
Right.
If your cartridge also includes a sound chip or anything else, well, you have to write it for the cartridge, of course.
Right.
That extra feature. Whereas if you write for disk, of course, you are pretty well locked into what the standard system has, unless you make it support a multi-pack and then talk to a cartridge like the sound and speech pack separately. There's still that option.
Right. And that was a question I had asked when I first started hearing about these new sound cards, is it might be a way to make this kind of a reusable component. And I know there are pros and cons to that, because on the one hand you're saying it's a $1 chip and it's got $5 worth of supporting circuitry to make it work. So does that justify a whole separate cartridge, and does that justify needing an MPI at this point and stuff? So I can see both sides of that coin too. I think on one hand, if you're making it on a cartridge, I think the cartridge itself is a value-added thing, and if that cartridge has sound on the cartridge too, it's an even more value-added thing because you're getting some bonus hardware with this amazing new game. But again, now for you to develop that, you need to have access to that hardware to develop it, and that's the part I don't understand because I don't know what it's like to develop. And I would just imagine it. And John Strong can probably chime in on this too. I don't know if it's a degree of difficulty or an extra challenge, but it's just more things you have to. There's more balls in the air you're juggling now as you're not only developing your code, but now testing your code to work on hardware that's not necessarily on board at the moment. And how do you connect those dots, and how do you make it simple for yourself as the developer to work on the project and then finally produce the final project? Is it intimidating? Is it frustrating? Is it overwhelming? Is it a great degree of complexity, or could it be managed?
Well, the thing is, a ROM cartridge, if you ignore the fact that a cartridge could have an additional sound chip and all that, the ROM cartridge itself is really just another storage medium. It's not really anything magical. It's just another storage medium, just like having something on disk. Now, if, as I said, if the cartridge has additional features, well, then the software on the cartridge could use that. But then you could do the same even on disk. You have a program that talks to the cartridge through the multi-pack and do the same thing. In other words, you can develop the software on disk or whatever. You don't actually have to have the cartridge as such unless it has the extra features. You can develop everything like I did with Popstar Pilot and then later put it onto a cartridge. But yeah, if you're going to support any additional functions of that cartridge, like the sound, well, you do have to own that cartridge. And the way to do it as a developer would be to have a multi-pack with the cartridge, and then you develop everything, of course, on the disk, supporting the cartridge that way. It's just the end product has to all then be moved into a cartridge, and there's a lot more work then at the end just to get the code into a cartridge to support a sound chip that's on there. That manufacturing of the cartridge, the additional cost of posting it, and there's a few things to look at. I'm all for cartridges. I like cartridges. I've always wanted I've always wanted to create a cartridge, but the roadblocks I see is the expense, of course, and the additional development that's required to support it. It is a lot easier to do it on a disk. It's a lot lower in cost. I mean, I've costed a ROM cartridge. If I was to sell Popstar Pilot on a cartridge, I have to factor in the cost of manufacturing that cartridge, and maybe even to have the circuit board designed. Now, hopefully someone will create a generic cartridge that everyone can use, but at the moment,
John Linville did.
I would have to design a cartridge, a circuit board, and have it manufactured and tested and all that. That's actually not the hard part. You can actually make that board fairly cheaply. Then you've got to add in the cost of the plastic case, which is what, $10 to $15, just the plastic box on its own. And then I have to factor in being in Australia, and if I'm to ship out a package, that postage is going to double what I used with Popstar Pilot on a CD. We over here go by the thickness of a parcel. If your parcel can pass through a certain slot size at the post office, you pay a certain amount. If it goes over that slot size, it doubles. CD that I distributed Popstar Pilot would fit through the slot. A ROM pack doesn't. So straight off, I'm up for about $20 US postage, only the postage. So $20 US postage plus $15 US for the plastic cartridge case, plus the cost of the PCB board, let's say $10 as well. Straight off, you've already got almost $35 there just in costs. That's zero profit. And you have to wonder, all this work, is it really worth it? So that was my argument why that some people thought I was against cartridges. I'm not against cartridges. It's just the actual whole process of producing a package on a cartridge is a little bit prohibitive in some areas, the cost and the time involved. I personally think that the big value really in any soft cartridge is not so much the cartridge itself. I know there are collectors out there that'll collect cartridges, but really the value is the game itself. And you can have that on disc, cartridge, even cassette, really, for that matter, if it's a good game. So, yeah, I would love a cartridge, but it's just the logistics of getting a cartridge out at a low enough price that's fair to people
Right.
Which is why I had Popstar Pilot. I sold for $25 US, complete postage, manufacturing, and threw in a lot of bonus content on the CD. So I mean, you didn't actually buy just Popstar Pilot.
Right,
you bought six whatever other games as well. It was really 7 or whatever programs plus a bonus video, all for $25. You know, so it was good value. So I do aim to try to get good value for the consumer. So cartridges, I can't quite see the good value unless the prices come down. And, well, hopefully that'll change over time. But that's probably why I'm a bit hesitant on a cartridge at this point.
Well, the rough numbers that because I had inquired, you know, what are some ballpark prices? This is just material. This does not include labor. But supposedly to get the cartridge and the circuit board, we'll just call it $20. So if you were to get the red cartridge that you know, the John Linville and Mike Rowe and everybody, the red cartridge and John Linville's circuit board and everything else, the cost of that equipment is about, you know, let's say $18, $20 just for the hardware. So you got to figure out whatever price you wanted to sell your thing for, and you got to add $20 for that, because you've now got a $20 cost just in the plastic and the circuitry that you need to do to that. Now you're in a unique situation because you have international shipping, which throws a bigger monkey wrench into it. But if you were able to produce the image for this and have somebody stateside make the cartridges for you and ship them state-wise, that would at least get rid of the shipping hurdle. But the actual additional production cost, again, not including labor, but just you know, hardware, it's about $20. And so if you were able to sell Popstar Pilot on a cartridge for $45 in the States, I don't think anybody would have an issue for that price, because that's the average price of a cartridge is $40. You know, that's what Farfall was going for. That was Bomb Squad was going for around $40. So I don't think $40 to $50 retail for a cartridge is an unreasonable price to ask, knowing that almost half of that is not even, like you say, it's not profit. It's material costs, and then you have, you know, the time to physically put it all together and put a label on it, put it in a box, and the whole 9 yards. You know, so I think to me, and again, not knowing all the moving pieces, the biggest logistical challenge becomes the assembly of this when it's done. You know, putting the cartridge together and putting a label on it and putting it in a box and things like that. You know.
And I guess one question I have is like, if you take a look at the cartridges that have been sold, and they've sold for 40 or 20 or 30 depending on the game, obviously. But the sales figures that Nick has had are quite a bit past them, and I'm wondering if maybe there is a threshold that some people aren't going to spend $40 if they're not cartridge collectors or cartridge, I wouldn't say fans, but, you know, it's not as important. They want the game as opposed to the collectible. Because I mean, Nick's sales are, you know, literally triple to quadruple what everybody else has been getting. I don't know if that's related to the fact that it's cheaper.
Because it was on disc. We're talking about the person who likes collecting cartridges. Well, fair enough. Anyone who likes collecting cartridges will prefer a cartridge, and especially if the cartridge has something extra like a sound chip or whatever, you know, that makes it more collectible. But not everyone does. There are those that don't want a cartridge, can't afford anything more than, say, $20 or whatever for a game, or can't see the value. Like I said on my on a previous chat that we had here, some of the people who bought my Popstar Pilot weren't even game players. You know, they bought it solely to support my work, and, you know, I'm very grateful for that. That's great. I don't know if they would have forked out $40, $50 or whatever just to show their support for a product that they're not really going to play. You know what I mean? It's having a lower price point does bring it below that threshold that everyone can afford it. So my goal is that everyone should be able to afford the software, which is why I've gone to disc, because it's a lower cost option. Maybe I could do a cartridge version of that. I say Popstar Pilot as an example. Now I could do a enhanced version. If there's a cartridge out there with sound, I could do a new version that supports the sound chip on the cartridge and then sell that as a ROM pack, and that'll be a more expensive one, but at least the cartridge collector could buy the cartridge. But those that don't want to spend that sort of money and want to just support your work or whatever, well, they can buy the disc. I mean, it still comes in a nice box and a CD with all the bonus material and all that. It's still good value for $25, but they might think, oh, $45 is a bit more than what I really want to spend. So you've got essentially two markets there. Now, I just tend to go for the bigger one initially in order to give everyone a chance to have access to the program. If I can get rid of some of the logistic problems, then yeah, I can move on to a cartridge. But for now, at the moment, it's just a little bit too much. And with Gunstar, I'm going to make that floppy CD as well, floppy or CD as well. Okay. Again, to keep the costs down. But then I might consider doing a limited edition cartridge version. Hopefully in 12 months or whatever, we will see, like what you say, someone who will step forward to say, I will make your cartridge. You just give me the image and I'll do the rest. Of course, they'll want to be paid something, so that is an expense there anyway. And really, back in the day, when you talk about Steve Bjorg and even Rick, who's here now, they never made cartridges themselves. Hey, Rick, they never actually made the cartridges. Right. They did exactly that. They made the image and gave it to Tandy. Tandy made it all. So, they had that system in place back then. Right. But nowadays we don't have Tandy or any other company. So
we do have Neil Brookings. We have Neil.
Yeah. Being in Canada.
Yeah. Well, I've got an EEPROM burner too, so I can burn EEPROMs like that.
You don't want to look. Yeah, it's more than just burning a ROM and sticking it on a card. I mean, you want the whole package, the presentation, the label, everything. Whether you put it into a red cartridge or whatever. The artwork, everything. It's a full package.
That's true.
The cartridge box.
Yeah, everything. It's a package. You're not selling a piece of hardware. Here, play with this. Yeah. You are buying a product. So, maybe over time we will see someone who will offer that sort of service. But for now, for programmers like me, we have to take on the burden of all that manufacturing as well as developing the game. And, I don't want to get sidetracked from the game because I'm too busy trying to produce a cartridge. The focus is towards making a good game.
Yes.
And I don't want to see, cartridges, it's the latest fad. Let's produce everything on a cartridge. I mean, some programs really are quite happy on a disc. You can sell it at a low price. You don't want to have to pay a lot of money for a game that you would typically have on a disc. But if you're going to put a lot of effort into put a really good game, I can see where a cartridge adds value to it, makes it a collectible. It's a product. Right. It's a good product, Yeah. So my thinking
that actually brings up a memory of mine. Actually, this was just after Curtis and I did the Nitrous 9 project, but I ended up on another project that started as a cartridge using the Bitbanger port and going to an advertising sign which is scrolling sign. And it actually ended up starting on the cartridge using cassette-based system, but it actually ended up moving towards an actual disc-based system, which we actually totally abandoned the cartridge because of the fact that it's now disc-based, so let's put everything on disc.
And that brings up another part that I was going to mention too, is if you have software and then you find out later on there's some bugs or some stuff you want to change, you can update a disk image super easy. You can even send it to people to transfer to a real disk. If it's burnt onto ROM, you're stuck. You got the buggy version.
You got to send a new ROM to the customer.
Yeah.
Which is why Windows doesn't get supplied on a ROM.
But there's also one other There's also one other problem is not everybody has a CoCo. Some people use emulators, and there's times I like to just play on an emulator instead of just on the CoCo. So with the cartridge, you're kind of limited to the type of computer you're going to use.
Well, and I know Bruce has been waiting patiently to chime in here, and I'm going to give you your second here. I'm going to give you your chance in just 2 seconds, Bruce. But I want to mention two things that a few people have mentioned in chat that I also threw out on Facebook too. Bosco says have different versions, have the digital download and the deluxe cartridge version, which is what Ed Snyder is agreeing with as well. I'd also thrown out that suggestion about you could let the consumer choose. I can buy a digital download. I could buy somebody might not even want to pay for the CD-ROM. They just give me the disk image via email and just give me that. I'll be happy with that. Somebody might say, yeah, give me the Popstar Pilot package because I like that. That's collectible, and so I'll give you $10 for the digital version of the software. I'll give you $20 for the CD-ROM version, and I'll give you $40 for the cartridge. Or somebody like me might say, well, I want all of them. I want the super deluxe bonus edition that's got the cartridge, the CD-ROM in this, and an autograph and a freaking plush toy at the same time. Only available at Target type situation. So there's other ways that you could possibly offer variations on that. And now I'll shut up and let Bruce Moore go because he's Canadian. He's very polite. He's been waiting a long time to speak. So
yeah. Well, let me say that if Nick, if you do put a cartridge version out, Jake and I will be very happy to plunk some cash down for it. So let me just put that out there, even though we've got your disc already. So, so a lot of the stuff that Nick Morentis is saying, I totally identify with and agree with. And I'm not an A-level developer here. I do mostly basic with a little bit of machine code, and I've got this game that I started when I was a kid and abandoned, and I'm resurrecting it, So I'll just tell you this little story, and it kind of hits all the points, I think. I show up at CoCo Fest demoing my game, Forest of Doom, and Boise walks up to me and says, "You should put that on a cartridge." And I'm like, "What? What are you talking about?" Yeah. Put it. I just couldn't even get my head around this idea. And I said, "Well, yeah, but it's in BASIC." "Well, I think there's a way to do that." And I'm thinking to myself, I have no clue how to do that. I'm never going to do that, Time goes on. And I had a kind of, and there's been the talks on the Facebook about, like all the stuff that Nick's talking about, the cost of the development and how to develop it and the constructing it and shipping and all that kind of business. And those all seem like barriers to me. But I had a conversation with John Linville just a couple of days ago. And, what I got out of that was the idea of licensing the game to, let's call it, the Linville Brookings Incorporated or whatever. Basically what I got out of this conversation was that if I can get my game ready to go, and sort of hand it over to them, they'll kind of make it happen on a cartridge, and I don't have to figure it out. At least if this is. I think that's what he was telling me.
They would be your Radio Shack.
Yeah, he would be. Yeah,
he'd be the vendor, and he could, and then it'd be licensing. We'll sell it, and you can have whatever, figure out a royalty thing, and
And I have some comments after Mr. Moore. So.
Okay. Oh, okay.
I've been trying to. I don't know if you guys can. You guys hear me? Okay.
Sure thing.
Yeah, I've been trying to speak before, and I guess my audio was not getting through. I was going to say something similar, that I can eliminate most of Nick Morentis' concerns, although the fact is the cartridge will cost more because there is an inherent cost in having the hardware. But we have, for instance, the CoCo Flash unit can have whatever software preloaded into it. So if he can license it to Jim Brain, we can preload a copy of whatever binary into a CoCo Flash and ship it out from US.
Well, that's not much difference to having an SDC and just putting it on an SDC.
But it's on a cartridge, though, and you sell the cartridge.
First of all, doesn't require
sell the cartridge.
Well, sure it is. First of all, it doesn't require, multi-pack or floppy controller or floppy emulation or anything like that. Secondly, I'm sure we can figure something out where we can brand it with a special label, etc., that has this preloaded on it. If there's an update, you can actually reflash the unit, because these days flash memory and ROM memory is, almost the same price. So, and the CoCo Flash is flash memory, so there is an update or a new version, you can reflash it.
And that's what Ed Snyder just put that out in the chat too.
Redoing the image on the SD
store. It's a special edition of the CoCo Flash cartridge. It has this preloaded, but you could also use it to put other games and stuff onto as well.
Does it have a sound chip as well, does it?
It has a limited sound chip in the current edition of the CoCo Flash. It has, really, it's not a sound chip. It's a digital to analog converter, which is the Orchestra 90 hardware.
Oh, yeah.
So
that's another option.
It's another option that's out there. I'm sure. It certainly solves the shipping problem because he's based in the U.S. So there's that. The hardware already exists. If the user purchases this with your software on it, then they also get all the benefits of a CoCo Flash unit as well that they can use for other stuff. So it sort of helps offset the price. You're still not going to probably have the type of profit margin that you would have with a strictly disk-based or especially an email-based solution. You've got a lot lower shipping costs and packaging costs. That's definitely the cheapest option. But, as you say, it's another option that you could consider.
It certainly is. Bruce, did you have more to add? I don't know if you finished your thought.
Yeah, I did. I'm certainly not interested in making any money here. I'm not concerned about profit margin personally. That's not a deal. Like, I want someone to play my game and like it,
Yeah.
And I want lots of people to. And I've made an assumption that if I put this on a cartridge, then that would only people who would buy a cartridge would get to play it. And and talking with John, it was like, well, no, you can do digital. You could do a digital download too. You could do a limited edition. You can have two versions of it.
Sure.
And that never dawned on me that there would be a licensing issue that way. I thought it'd be locked in. So now it's like, well, gee, why wouldn't I do a limited edition and be able to use that awesome sound chip? Because background music in a game, it affects. It's so awesome, So
the CoCo Flash really needs to get that added, like a real sound chip, because the DAC you still have to drive with the CPU. You're not going to be able to do it any better than you're doing now with software DAC anyway.
Yeah, that's true. I like that chip.
We looked at that. We looked at that during the initial run, and maybe if this current run sells out, we'll look at maybe doing a version 2.0 with some. But the thing is, it would have added several dollars to the cost of the unit because of the increase in the PC board size and the cost of the chip and the hardware to
and what is the ballpark cost of a CoCo Flash product right now?
I think it's around $50, somewhere around.
Okay.
And that's just, again, and that's par for the course for a cartridge, and that's just because of the cost of the chip, the cost of packaging, and the whole 9 yards.
Right. Well, I think John Strong wanted to chime in. I think John wanted to chime in, and we also have Rick Adams here right now too, who not only has experience doing cartridges in the past, but is working on something presently that may or may not end up on a cartridge. So I'd like to hear from Rick as well when John has his 2 cents thrown in here. John Strong.
Yes.
And now that I finally got Skype to cooperate with me and let my voice through, I'm going to have to disconnect because I got some other stuff I got to do.
All right, Barry. Thanks for your input. Much appreciated.
All right.
Yes, Rick, I see the poster. Thank you.
Subtle advertising.
Yes, for the hearing impaired.
And having produced the cartridge, and I identify with the stuff that Nick is saying, and with Bruce, and so there's all these issues to handle. One was cost. That was very scary. Okay, so I invested in quite a lot. Not just the batch of the boxes. Ken Linder did a great job on those boxes. Okay, but that was another cost. Okay. The cartridge, the circuit board, we did share a design with John Linville. He was great about doing that. That helps bring the cost because we could order a larger quantity of them. But those boards were only less than $3 a board.
Wow.
Okay. Of course, you put an EEPROM on it. There's going to be about $1 there. And then you throw a case on it. In my situation, I knew in advance that people were looking to making the molded cases. Okay. And also the announcement came before, of course, before Bomb Squad's there. But by time I knew when the availability of the cartridge would actually be available for me to put it in, I had come up with the design for basically the concept of the idea for the cartridge. And it was just so cool to have that multicolor cartridge.
No doubt.
I had to do that. The other thing is what I ended up doing is I ended up trading time for money. Okay. And so it takes me time and, after my time to produce those cartridges instead of just spending money. Mm-hmm. And so that was a good trade-off for me. And not necessarily that trade-off is good for anybody else, but for me it was good because I had this, cartridge that fit the vision that I have with the game. And so on. Bomb Squad. Okay, if I didn't do it on cartridge, it probably would never seen the light of day. And here's the reasons why. One, there's already, Minesweeper type games out there. Okay, is mine different than theirs? Yes. Okay, I think it goes a little bit farther about playing different levels than the ones I've seen. And it does use the very cool high-res software that Nick and John and Robert all worked on, and so I guess there's some differences. Is there enough difference to make it worthwhile to put all the time in, and would anybody buy it? I had a couple people approach me wanting, just a file that they could play, and but only a couple out of that. So it's going to match the game. Certain games will go, you just don't want to conceive of as a disc. I think this made the best choice for Bomb Squad, I really think, was the cartridge. Such as, I've mentioned to Nick and with some of the Skype conversations that disc was probably hands down the best choice for him to release the disc game.
The Pop Star you're talking about, right?
Yeah, the Pop Star. I think it was a good choice for it.
I don't know that I would have been as interested in Bomb Squad on disc, because to me part of the novelty too was it was a situation where the sum was greater than the parts, where not only is it a new game for the CoCo, which is cool, but it is also on a cartridge, and it's a custom cartridge with the cool little bomb on the front of it and the little bombs on the side. So in your case, I think it was a great move to make this a new game and a very cool custom cartridge that you can't get anywhere else. And to me, that was part of the appeal to want to have it as well, and that's just my thought process.
That was kind of the thing, I'm not the master promoter that Nick is. He does a really good job. Pat yourself on the back, just don't hurt your arm doing it, Nick. So I'm not that master promoter that he is. I do a little bit of promotion that helps. You've seen Rick Adams, you've seen the posters, and I had a T-shirt, and those things. So it helps to have that, the nice box, the cool little hokey backstory, with references to Z80 and different things like that. Those are all kind of what fits together to make Bomb Squad what Bomb Squad is. Would I like that Bomb Squad to sell as many copies as Pops Up? Oh, absolutely. Okay, but it's met expectations.
Sure. Well, let me ask you guys this here too. What is your concern about modern day, for lack of a better term, piracy, where once your software, if it's out there in the ether and it's digital and it's obviously very easy to share, is that going to cut down on sales? Is that a concern of yours? Is it a fear of yours? Is it just realistic that it's going to happen to some degree?
I think it's realistic. Sorry.
Well, go ahead, Nick.
Oh, I think it's realistic to expect it will get copied. That's been happening for the last 30 years, so
it hasn't stopped.
It's tradition now.
Yeah. It's going to happen. You know, you're crazy if you think you can stop it, unless, of course, you do have a cartridge which has some feature whereby you can't copy it, or even if you do, you use some of the features that are on that cartridge. You know, you could. You know, and that was one of the reasons why cartridges became popular back in the day, because you couldn't copy a cartridge. You know, that was your avenue to kill software piracy for a while. Yeah,
about 6 months.
Now, I haven't really been concerned about the piracy with Popstar Pilot because I knew it was going to happen. If I was frightened enough about piracy, I would probably not have written the game, and then we wouldn't have Popstar Pilot or anything.
Right.
So I just went ahead and did it because it was something I enjoyed doing. And I thought, well, if I can sell 20 copies, surely I'll sell 20 copies. That's good enough. As it turned out, of course, I sold more than 20 copies, and there are people out there who could have copied the game, but they did support my work, and that was very encouraging. That goes to show that you might have piracy there, but you do also have people who do appreciate your work and do show it by buying the game, and that was a very good outcome. So in my next game, I want to sort of go along with that and still produce another package for people. I'm encouraged to go ahead and do it, work hard, do the best I can, and sell it again for as low as I can for everyone to have access to. And I think you'll get people appreciate that and will support you, even if they could get a pirate copy. That's it. So yeah, I didn't really worry too much about piracy. I just concentrated on getting the game done because I wanted to get it done.
Very cool to hear. And Rick Adams, we haven't heard from you. I'd love to hear from you on your experiences with cartridges, past, present, and future.
Well, I remember Dale and I went to a Color Computer users group once, and we brought along backpacks that had our games in them. And, we put the backpacks down, and then we're talking to people, and all of a sudden somebody taps me on the shoulder and says, "This won't copy." He had taken a cartridge out of my backpack, and he had run some sort of a utility on it that was supposed to copy the contents of it. And for some reason, copy protection or the utility wasn't written very well. It didn't work. And so he wanted to know what was up with that. And I said, "Give me that." So piracy and stupidity and taxes and death all come with life. And when I did cartridges, I deliberately made mine very easy to copy. Not because I wanted to make it easy for the people who wanted to pirate it, but because I knew that there were
that.
Pardon me?
I can vouch for that.
Yes. Yeah. The reason I did that was that some people liked to copy floppies, copy cartridge games onto floppies so that they could play them off the disc. And I thought that was a legitimate thing to do. And it's like, if you bought the game, I think that you should be able to, play it from whatever medium you wanted to. And so I made it easy to do that. As a matter of fact, I got email once from a notorious pirate. He was very disappointed with me. He said, "Your games are so fun. There is no copy protection to crack. All I have to do is just copy it. So, neener. I pirated your game and it was super, super easy. So take that." And I'm like, I don't frickin' care. So it did, I'm sure that piracy did eat into my profits, but, I happen to have been really, really lucky with my dealings with two of the three of my dealings with Tandy and Activision. And it got me some nice checks, and that was really nice. And they might have been a little bit higher if there hadn't been any piracy, but you might as well,
right.
Well, when I might as well wish for a pony.
Right, right.
Now, as for bomb threat, assuming I get this thing actually wrangled through, which right now it's at a stage where it's like, okay, let me change this. Oh, that just broke the heck out of everything. So it's really at a frustrating phase right now. But assuming I get all the way through this thing, it's like, will I put it on cartridge? Well, I'm really lazy. I don't, it's like I can put it on cartridge, and it's like that's an extra expense up front. That's extra hassle up front. And I'm a really lazy guy. I'd be really tempted just to hand that off to somebody else to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure people would be willing to do it. But if I do that, then to be fair, I got to I got to give them a cut. And that's a little less out of, so, it's kind of the color computer is kind of a small pie right now compared to the past. And so, Temple of Ram, basically, if you think of the scale involved, with Temple of Ram, with the first couple of checks, I bought a car. When I did Delphi term as a shareware thing, I made enough for a trip to Starbucks every 2 or 3 months. And then from what I hear, if you do a cartridge game now, you're going to make enough overall for a nice weekend trip to Duluth. Which is nothing. That's nothing to sneeze at.
Right.
But it's it's smaller than in the past. So it's like you're not fighting over that that princely a sum anymore. So so will I put it on cartridge? I don't know. It's a neat idea. I'm kind of it's like I could, might not. I'm not sure. So probably at this point, I think the fairest thing for me to say is that I'll burn that bridge when I come to it.
Sure. Well, speaking for myself, and hopefully I'm not alone, I would love to see it on a cartridge, since we are used to seeing Rick Adams' Tandy games fed to us in a nice shiny plastic box. I would love to see that. Ed has basically mentioned this. Ed Snyder's mentioning this in chat, and I believe John Linville basically mentioned this in episode 24 of the podcast. I think they're basically saying what they also told Bruce Moore, is that we'll do it for you. So between John Linville and Neil Blanchard, if you just wanted to pass everything to them, they will handle the entire production of that. That's just one source. We've also mentioned that you have Jim Brain's flash cartridge. So I believe there are people out there who you can use as a resource. And so then you just factor in what that cost is of parts and labor, and you just make sure that you get whatever expected amount of money you wanted for your game, no matter how you sold it. You just add the cost of that to the sale price. But I think there's a market for it. I think, again, I like the idea of the different versions too, where somebody wants a digital download versus buying it on a CD with a nice package versus buying it in the shiny plastic cartridge. I think there's a market for all three of these. Digital distribution obviously is very easy to do. There's a company that will produce CDs for you and DVDs, and so I've done that with my DVDs, and we did it with Nick's Popstar. So if you wanted to do a disc image on an optical disc, there are companies that can produce those for you and ship them out on demand, and you set the price. And so that is a built-in service that exists. Unfortunately, there isn't one of those online services that will produce cartridges on demand because it's such a unique thing, but we have resources for that. And so I think it would be very cool to see Bomb Threat or any new CoCo game on a cartridge, or to have it as an option,
I think that the chances of there being 0 cartridge copies of Bomb Threat is pretty low. I think that it's pretty likely that, I would like to have one. And there are certain people that would just love to have one, and it's like, I don't see why we shouldn't make that happen. On a larger scale, well, we'll talk about that.
So, and also, I want to mention on piracy too. I think today's CoCo market is a lot different, in that it's all the diehards, the people that really want to support the platform, the ones that are still using it. So I don't think your piracy rate's going to be anywhere near as high as it was back in the day, percentage-wise.
Sure.
Right.
When I was explaining to when I was explaining to people at work. I said, I'm going off to this computer convention, and this is kind of an unusual deal. Let me try to explain this to you. And then I tell them about, there's this computer that I did a couple of video games for way back in the day, and it got discontinued a long time ago. And now I said, basically, the elevator pitch is, there are 70 people in the world that give a rat's patootie about this computer, and they're all going to be in Chicago, and they're all going to be wanting to meet me, and they think of me as like a hero. So that's how I explain it. And it's like, it isn't that I'm not a hero, it's just that I'm a hero in kind of a small pond.
Sure.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah, but it's
so it's like I show up at this computer convention, and I get to sign my autograph on things, which is just like that's really kind of hard for me to wrap my head around. I mean, I understand it, but it's like, well, this is not something I ever thought that I would be doing, So, so I find it, very gratifying, and I feel very honored. But on the other hand, it's a small pond. It's like, I'm an important person in this room. It's not like I'm some worldwide celebrity. So it sounds like I'm running it down, and I don't want it to sound like that. It's just that I'm like a celebrity, but I'm not a celebrity. It's like I can't quite wrap my head around it.
Well, yeah, you're being very modest, and that's fine. And you're basically saying you're a big fish in a small pond, which could be true for a lot of situations.
Understand the feeling.
But I believe that the significance is bigger than the size of the pond in general, because I believe it is part of history, and history is eternal. And the history of Tandy and Radio Shack and the Color Computer is bigger than the size of the pond, and it's bigger than the size of the community. And by the way, the 70 people that show up are part of probably 1,000 or more people that make up the documented CoCo community. But there's only, there's the people, and then there's the people who have the means and wherewithal to get to CoCo Fest. But yeah, I think the pond is a little bit bigger than we think it is, and I think the significance of this pond in the scheme of history and technology in the 80s and 8-bit is bigger too. But that being said, being modest is always a nice, admirable trait as well. But I think the historical significance of what all of you have done for the Color Computer and 8-bit computing is bigger than the size of the community or the number of units that were ever sold by Tandy, and this is my humble opinion. So,
but it's just like the experience of people coming to me and saying, "Will you please autograph my cartridge?" It's like, wow, that's really wow. Okay, yeah, I would definitely be happy to. So that is not foolish. That makes me feel very special, and thank you for that experience.
Well, to tell you the truth, Rick, your autographed copy of that disc that you gave me is sitting in a frame right now with glass covering.
Wow. That's awesome.
That's cool. Mine's on a shelf, but I like the idea of framing it too. That's a good one. That's you just raised the bar there, Bill Noble. So
it's got to be in the domed plastic enclosure with the velvet.
Well, I mean
well, it's almost there.
Well, when you
and
sold,
laser sensors so nobody breaks into it.
So you provided for the auction. You provided a few of your remaining original copies of your original source code development discs that were part of Shanghai. So that is a very unique, rare piece of history, and I'm glad to own a piece of that history as well. But I even think that might be something that might be part of these special editions, where if somebody wants to buy, like for me, I would love to have a copy of Bomb Threat on a cartridge, and if you could do it on a real floppy, and if you were going to provide autographed floppies of Bomb Threat, that would be a cool value-added thing. If you wanted to do an autographed copy of a floppy that had source code on it, even though you're producing multiple copies of them, it's still a piece of history. It's still a piece of the product and the production of this product, the process of making this product. one of the things that I think would really be a good measuring stick, and Nick has a blog. I don't know if you are going to be blogging this, but there's got to be a way where you can track interest with like an online poll. How many people would like to purchase a digital only copy? How many people would like to purchase a disc image based optical copy? How many people would like to purchase this? And then even better yet, I think I suggested this to you in Skype, is set up pre-orders where if somebody wanted to purchase the cartridge and you figure the street price of that might be $40, $50, whatever it is, you ask for a pre-order for everybody who wants one, and they send you the $20 up front as a pre-order for that. You already know how many you're going to sell, and you've already got the money in the bank to cover some of those material costs of getting this done. And it's easy to have people raise their hand saying, yes, I want one. But when somebody actually ponies up the $20 for a pre-order, that is a tangible metric that you can say, all right, I got 40 people who want a copy of my cartridge, and I've now got, $400 that I can use to start buying these materials. That I don't think is an unreasonable thing to do through a website or whatever, as well as expect somebody to do. And I would pre-order Nick's game today. I'd pre-order your game today if it was an option. So
right. That brings me to another topic, which is if I were to do a software blog, it's like the guts of that usually is WordPress. What WordPress themes and or plugins would be good for a software blog? So somebody that actually does a software blog might be able to answer that question for me. The other thing is that on my wife is listening to my voice in the background, and I'm about to say something that she doesn't know, and so she's going to go, on a complete whim, what would you call it? Impulse purchase. Yes. I bought templeofrom.com for $12. And I haven't done anything with it. So that might be a place where I put a software blog.
There you go.
So now you know.
Templeofrom.com.
And we'll probably have a conversation about this right after this call.
You spent $12. Okay, somebody in chat just said too, Alan Zeiser says, I would pre-order copies of carts too. So yeah, I don't think that's unreasonable. And that happens now with all the new games coming out for PC and for Xbox and stuff. That pre-orders is not a foreign concept to consumers. A lot of times if you do a pre-order, you get a special extra piece of DLC with your purchase, where if you order Call of Duty in advance, you get a special camouflage gun to go with your character or something like that, But I like the idea of a plush toy. Get the plush bomb with your pre-order purchase or something.
Or even a customized version of the game that has your name in the credits as a thank you or something like that.
Something like that. Yeah, people do that kind of stuff on Kickstarter all the time and stuff like that too, where you get people to do stuff. So I think there are ways to track this and even, kind of help subsidize some of the production costs by the whole idea of a pre-order situation. I think there's, you want hard numbers.
Scares me. Kickstarter kind of scares me.
Okay,
because they always want all of these different tiers of, if you, pledge this amount of money, we'll get you the special thing. And it's like people always sort of get sucked into that, and they start promising more than they can deliver.
Yeah.
And I've seen lots of Kickstarters where, they take the money and the thing is like 2 years after, it was supposed to be fulfilled, and there's no, game yet. So I don't want to be there.
You don't want to get caught in the vaporware.
Right.
Right.
I know promised a game, and it's been 2 years and got like about $800,000, and there's no game yet, and it's like, okay, I'm losing respect for this person.
Right. But I think there's a way to do it. I think there's a way to track and gauge interest and get some numbers to give you some projections on how many units you might sell. I think technology allows us to do that, and so that might help you guys plan on this. So I think it's a good conversation, and to quote John Linville right now, we beat this one to death for now.
Sorry.
Yeah, are we done talking about cartridges right now, do you think? And Richard, you haven't spoken a word yet, Chris Lip, but we're glad to have you here on this call.
I don't know if you can hear me.
I can hear you.
Yeah, we just heard you.
All right, because I interjected a couple times and it just kind of like.
Oh, okay. Maybe it was hard to tell who it was. So.
That's fine. No, I'm not a developer. I'm a user.
Uh-huh.
And so my thoughts on the cartridge, though, is that they are long-lasting. And you can plug them into a multi-pack and you can have a choice. Someone talked about the CoCo Flash. That was another interjection I want to throw in there because that would be, you could have multiple games on one cartridge and you can switch between them. So like Nick, you've got a couple games going there. If you ever did go cartridge, you can put your collection on a flash type thing and set it out. Yes, it's going to be more expensive.
Right. But yeah, in the case of Jim Brain's CoCo Flash, which wasn't designed to hold a single thing, that makes the cost a little bit higher. But one of the things that Ed Snyder has been alluding to in the chat here is that the cost between Flash and ROM now is a very moot thing. So if you wanted to make a smaller scale Flash cartridge that could address the needs of reprogramming, if you had to update your software, that might be less than a $50 retail cost for just the cartridge. But yeah, I think there are options. I think the technology exists. I think we have people with experience to produce these and help guide us in the direction of what the right solution is for each project, because I imagine some projects might not need bank switching. They could fit on a single 16K or 16K ROM images. Some of them won't need sound. And so I think there's a lot of different options. And I think from what I'm hearing and from, I think John Linville is a great advocate for wanting to do this, and he's done the proof of concept. The parts exist, and there are people willing to help with the assembly and production of this. So I think the time is ripe for more cartridges, and I think there is a market. But again, each person's motivation to do it or not do it is going to be their own. But speaking as a collector and a consumer and just a dreamer and a hoper, I would love to see as many new cartridges. I want to see software. At the end of the day, the software is the most important thing, as you've all said. And if the game sucks, you can put it in a freaking platinum shiny gold crusted box. It's still not going to change the fact that the game sucks. But having new Tandy cartridges to me is going to be a cool thing. And I think there's enough there's more reasons and there's more options to get it done than there are for I think for every hurdle that exists, there is a solution to that hurdle. So it's definitely doable. And I think maybe a poll or a survey or a pre-order list should help some of these developers say, okay, well, I've got 20 real people that have all ponied up $20 of real money ahead of time to do this, so I know I'm going to sell those many. So it's not even a question of, well, will I sell them? That might help gauge that market as well. But I think it's great that it's out there. Even the ability to put something in BASIC on a cartridge is kind of a cool idea. Hey, Grant just got here. Okay, hello everybody. Sorry I am not on the call today. I am still recovering from back surgery. Thank you for all your prayers and comments. I will return next week. I am having a CoCo recovery. All right, Grant. It's good to hear from Grant. Grant just had his back surgery. Yes. So, all right. Well, so we'll get off the cartridge train now. I mean, I think it's a great topic. I think it's gonna offer us options in the future. So it's nice to know that we have options. One of the other topics I did want to talk about was the actual CoCo Crew podcast that that just aired. Now we're getting close to 2 hours in this talk right now, and I'm not in a real hurry. I don't know if anybody else is in a hurry to get off right now, if you have other commitments or not. But we're coming up on 3:45 my time, which is going on. We're about an hour and 45 minutes. So we still good to talk for a few more things, or do people have other pressing engagements to get to?
I have a question.
No, I'm good.
I'm good.
Good to keep going.
All right, so oh crap, David Ladd's here. I forgot all about that. Thanks for reminding me, David. Before we get into the CoCo Crew podcast, just wrap up discussion about some of the topics that happened there, I want to play something that here's what blew my mind. All right, so I'm listening to the podcast, and I'm driving into work to my second job, and I'm pulling into the parking lot to get ready to teach my class at night, and I just get to the part where they finish the news segment, and they're like, okay, well, we're gonna play a commercial and then we're gonna be right back. And then it was this commercial, and I hear my voice. I hear, hey, it's original Gamer Stevie Strow. And I'm like, wait a second, how the hell did I get on this program here? And Mike Rowan had taken sound clips from different videos I've made and produced this whole really cool, like, hip-hop song. And when I talk about a very well-produced song, I mean, it's freaking awesome. So I want to play that right now for you guys to hear it. Did everybody get a chance to hear that?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty freaking awesome, I think. Mike Rowan is just way too talented for one human being.
The guy is awesome.
So there's one that's called Gameplay Goodness, and I don't remember which one is which. So let me just try to play this one right now, and let's see if it comes through. What's going on, everybody? It's me. It's original Gamer Stevie Strow. You know, Gameplay Goodness. Gameplay Goodness. Can you guys hear it? You know, Gameplay Goodness. All right, people. Gameplay Goodness. Thank you so much. You know, Gameplay Goodness. Yeah. You know, Gameplay Goodness. Are you ready for this? You know, Gameplay Goodness. Yeah. Gameplay Goodness. Are you ready for this? You know, Gameplay Goodness. Yeah. You know, Gameplay Goodness. You know, Gameplay Goodness. This is how we like to do it. Gameplay Goodness. All right, people. You know, Gameplay Goodness. Oh, this one doesn't have the talkover, I don't think. There's another one he did with the talkover. You know, Gameplay Goodness. You know, Gameplay Goodness. Yeah. Drop it low. Gameplay Goodness. All right, people. Gameplay Goodness. To the flow. Gameplay Goodness. Yeah. You know, Gameplay Goodness. Yeah. That's great. And ladies and gentlemen, that was one of Mike Rowan's latest creations. I mean, I was shocked when I heard that. I was like, oh man, this is freaking awesome, man. It's like this to be like immortalized in song by that. That was pretty cool. The commercials that he does, the promotions, all like the fake commercials that he does for all these products, you know, doing commercials for like J&M disc controllers and you name it. It's just
and factually accurate ones too.
You know what I mean? And it's like the products that he creates and the commercials he creates makes these products sound sometimes even better than what they might have been. So let me do this. How do I get over to the screen?
I actually go to the podcast to listen to those commercials.
Yeah, right. So I'm pulling up right now. These are the show notes, and so. Let's get into some of the news that was talked about. So they started off by talking about the passing of Bernie Appel, who was one of the CEOs of Radio Shack. They did talk about how birthday had the basic language had its birthday, which was kind of cool.
There's a good documentary up on YouTube about the beginnings of Basic too, which I think I put in the Facebook group.
Yeah. That was a pretty cool little thing there. It did mention CoCo Talk, which was kind of cool. So I think we got some good, airtime there talking about CoCo Talk. And I think one of the things he mentioned was we had planned, or I had suggested we should do podcast wrap-ups, but there hasn't been a podcast since we started, or not that much time since the last CoCo Fest and last podcast and things like that. So yeah, when you look at the news segment, so the news segment started at 35 minutes in, and then the feedback section was an hour and 51 minutes in. So you can see there's just a lot of news. There's just a lot of things that they cover. And what I do like about a lot of the news that is covered is that it's not always specifically CoCo, but it's retro, and it just makes us aware that there is a slightly bigger universe out there, and that retro is what is it? Vintage is the new old is the name of that website, but the other phrase is you can only be young once, but you're retro forever. A lot of cool items were brought up in the news. I'm just trying to see if there's anything in here that comes to mind if you want to. Hugo DeFort rebooting his gaming project, which is pretty cool. We've been keeping an eye on that. The idea of adding a 32-bit processor to the Vectrex arcade system was kind of a cool topic because it's basically saying we could create add-on chips to the CoCo, and to some extent we are doing that with things like the CoCo SDC and adding hardware and things like that. What else in here in the news is probably, and guys, just jump in at any time if there's something you wanted to talk about the podcast itself. It's pretty good. Now, this is a topic that we talked about as well a week or so ago when it was brought up on Facebook about, how much is too much, which was also kind of their host discussion. It's probably worth maybe digging that one up again. How much is too much on a CoCo? When is a CoCo no longer a CoCo? Should a CoCo remain stock? Are we and not only how much is too much on the hardware side or whatever, but how much is too much to pay when it comes to dumping money into this crazy hobby? I thought that was a pretty cool topic. I think we did kind of beat it a little bit, but is it worth talking again on some of our opinions on what's too much to add to a CoCo before it becomes a CoCo, and your thoughts on these newer CoCo alternative platforms and stuff?
I think it's up to each individual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Right.
Well, something I think I should maybe bring up with the CoCo 3 FPA projects is the face of that might change in the next couple of weeks. There's something Roger Taylor's got going right now that actually is going to wholly affect all FPA projects.
In a good way, hopefully?
In a very good way.
Okay. So we're about to have the lids blown off of things here?
Yeah, Curtis kind of has a little inkling of what's going on there.
I do?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's cool. That's cool. When it comes to adding things like, how much memory do you add to your CoCo? I think we talked about that a little bit. 512. I mean, what the CoCo would have supported back in its time, up to 2 megabytes, or maybe in some cases more, 4 or 8 megabytes of RAM, if the software that supported it. I think the discussion then started to lean towards, which I don't know if we tapped into it too deeply, but when we start talking about this CoCo VGA project that Brendan Donaghy is working on now, he's trying to address a void where if you don't have a display to connect to, well, VGA is a way to do it. Okay, well, now while I'm doing that, now that I've got the ability to output the VGA, well, let's work on artifacts, and now let's work on, hey, we can do a 64 column mode, and we can do some color registers, and we can add a few more features. Is that too much? And again, we're probably all going to say that depends on the individual, and at the end of the day, what harm is it really causing if somebody chooses to purchase this and get a few new features out of their CoCo that probably only they are going to be able to take advantage of, because I don't think there's going to be global adaptation to everybody rewriting software for 64 columns and color register palettes and things like that. It's kind of a niche thing. Is it too much? My opinion, no. Somebody else's, maybe, The
CoCo has always been a hobbyist computer, though, more so than the Commodore 64s and stuff. I mean, there's a lot of hardware development. I mean, Alpha Products Colorware used to sell like a 12-slot expansion board with custom hardware boards, and a lot of people made their own boards, including Bill. That was just one of the things about the CoCo that was an alert to a lot of the hardware people, is that it was so easy to make additional peripherals for. There was tons of custom peripherals that people made for themselves, and they didn't try to sell them or give them away to anybody else either. So I don't think there is a limit to it, because it's up to the individual. It's what they're trying to do, what they're trying to learn to do. They might just do it as a learning experience. They might do it to solve a problem. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's any problem with that at all. It doesn't have to be popular.
That's just it, Curtis. It was very easy to actually make hardware for the CoCo.
Yeah.
That was the one thing I really enjoyed and was able to do, is invent all that stuff.
Yeah, like if you want to try to make a PC board for a PC these days, good luck.
Well, I think it's also something we had in common with the Apple. Dare I mention it, is the fact the ease of being able to add something onto it. The signals was out, the processor speed was something you could still work with, without being an expert on PC board layout. And most of the signals you needed were just right there for the most common things you would do. And you had a serial port. Guys were doing a bunch of stuff with MIDI, doing special add-ons for that. Yeah, it was a hacker's machine, really. Yeah. And so whatever we do, I think, is keeping with the tradition.
I mean, take a look at all the CoCos on eBay these days. You see ones with like modified power lights and little switches that people add in from ROM write protector, whatever else. It always has been a hacker's machine.
Yeah, the video that the 8-bit guy showed where he did the spray paint, we should probably talk about that too, but the spray paint restoration of the CoCo, how that one had the little LED in there and things like that too. And a different keyboard as well. Yeah, that wasn't uncommon. So there are what you would consider period correct mods that were done back then that would be done now that I don't think most people would have an issue with, but I think this particular person's issue was doing anything to the CoCo, keeping it. That was Cutter McGinnis, which is a cool name too, right? But and in his mind, it's a '57 Chevy and it should remain stock, and that's fine. That's his opinion, and they talked about it on the podcast, and we've talked about it here. If you're lucky enough to have more than one CoCo, you could have the stock CoCo, and then you could have the CoCos that you tinker on and do things. So what is too much? If you put a 6309 in a CoCo 1 or 2, is that too much? I don't think so. No. If you replace that CPU with some type of FPGA thing that all of a sudden turns it into a Pentium 4 with quantum mechanic technology on top of that, is that too much? Well, for your project, maybe not. But for somebody else, they might say, well, now it's no longer a CoCo because now you've added an ARM processor or something else, and now you've added a flux capacitor, and now you've added a dilithium crystal, and and a Keurig machine as well. So is it still a CoCo?
I'll take the Keurig too.
Hey, let's have some hot.
I could use one of those.
So actually, a 2-meg upgrade. If you put a coffee pot on top of that sucker, it would warm up enough to be a coffee machine. So.
Yeah. So if it's a hot CoCo Keurig machine hybrid, is it still a CoCo? Now it's a highly capable CoCo because it's making us coffee.
But even like adding on CPUs, like we're talking about the 639, which is kind of like a standard replacement's been around since like the chip's been around since the late 80s, but it was known as an upgrade in the early 90s. But there's also been like Z80 cards for running CPM, multiple ones from multiple vendors back in the day. Chris Burke was trying to get that 68008 Rocket board. He had prototypes done, demonstrated them at CoCo Fest. For him to manufacture it, he had to pre-sell, I think, something like 500, and he only got about 300 pre-orders committed, so we never made it. But I mean, he was ready to go.
That's cool. Yeah, I mean, it's
the same with the TC9 that we had, Curtis. They had so many boards available for that too.
Wow. Oh yeah, the K-Bus and everything else. Yeah.
So maybe the takeaway from this is that the CoCo is in the eye of the beholder. Yes. It's just like, what is a CoCo to you? What is your definition of a CoCo? We're all going to be different, and doesn't mean anyone is right or anyone is wrong.
Definitely.
From a collector's perspective, I would love to have one of each model of a CoCo in a shiny, pristine condition, possibly in the original packaging. That would be nice to have one of each CoCo in a box on a shelf or in a glass case to show off when, people come in and say, let me look at your old crap collection. For what am I going to use? What do I have in front of me right now? I have the Neil Blanchard CoCo I bought off of eBay. It's got some yellowing to it, but it works. It has some mods that were in it when I purchased it. So it has a 512K distro board. It has the 6309 CPU in it, and it has a non-working RF output canister. So I can't get the RF out of there, but I don't care about that, So my CoCo is not a pretty CoCo, but it works, and that's what I do my gaming on and my recording on. I think it'd be interesting for me to have one that was modified just to see what they're like. If I find one on eBay, I might want to buy one just to see what kind of weird thing they did to it. I don't know how much modifications I would reach out to do myself. I think I might start by trying to learn how to desolder and put on a socket to a CoCo 3 and change out the CPU. That might be a project. I might want to add extended basic to a CoCo that doesn't have it or something like that. Simple things. I don't know that I would go as far as drilling a hole in a case and putting in an LED myself. It's if you have one and it's done well and it doesn't look like a hack job, it's kind of almost an enhancement to the CoCo. But if it's really bad, I've got holes in my wall where I tried to put up shelves and measured wrong and did thing wrong and screwed it up, and so now I've got just a freaking Swiss cheese wall over here, and I wouldn't want to do that to a CoCo, So.
Well, my leg upgrades were neat. I put them in the cooling slots.
Yeah, that is kind of cool.
Yeah, it's that. In fact, that's what I did on My recent MPI upgrade is, I upgraded it for the CoCo 3, and then, okay, I've turned it on and off, no lights. Wait a minute, I had lights years ago. Oh, yeah, I had to add it. Okay. A cooling. Okay, I got a slot here. And it goes, LED.
Well, that raises the question now, because like under my desk now, I've got an Alienware tower where I can change the colors of all the LEDs on the side panel. So I can change what the little front badge looks like and what my side panels are. I can customize the colors on that. How hard would it be when you're talking about hacking and going too far and custom mods and LEDs? What about color changing lights we can put on our CoCo case that we could control through software?
I've actually seen some of those. I mean, there's some LED lights that tell you I'm running in low speed or high speed mode. It'll change from green if it's in low speed to red if it's high speed, for example.
Yeah.
Well, that actually brings up a point too, Curtis, with your NoCan 3 board. They had those 2 LEDs on there. I have no idea what they do, but I rearranged them so that you could actually...
One was a turbo light to tell you whether the 4 MHz turbo was enabled. I can't remember what the other one was off the top of my head.
Yeah, because the only time that the one I could get any of the LEDs working was when I booted OS 9. The 4 MHz light would turn on.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I wonder if it would be kind of a stupid use of a color computer, but I wonder if a color computer could drive the Christmas lights that I have. You would need something that could output like a pulse signal that was 5 volts. Does it have anything like that? The Bitbanger won't do it, I don't think.
Actually, it depends on how you're doing those LED lights. I did an interface to an LED panel of 5x7 matrix with multiple sections in the past. If it's using the same kind of technique, yes, it's possible.
Yeah. I use like, I think it's WS2811 controllers.
That would be an interesting project. It's like they basically have the CoCo take over the job of the Raspberry Pi that's driving your displays right now?
Yeah. Well, I think that'd be kind of crazy, but it's just sort of interesting to think about.
All the better reason.
The system I did for actually...
that just makes it normal CoCo.
It was an RS-232 based, but it actually did function and work properly.
Yeah, I remember that because you had like scrolling Pac-Man and text and all kinds of stuff on that thing.
Yeah, because CoCo is the hashtag there. Because CoCo.
When I put up the Pac-Man during the keynote, that was probably the biggest horse laugh that I got out of that.
Right. It's a very identifiable character for sure.
I guess the one thing from the discussion on the Facebook post that caused all this, the one thing I didn't like about the discussion was that there was quite a few people who just were negative. And even John Linville and a few others pointed out this, like you don't have to be negative. You don't have to agree with it, but accept the fact that somebody else, this is fine. If they want to do it, let them. Don't discourage it. You may not buy it yourself if they offered it for sale because it's not something you're interested in, but that is by no means to ridicule the person that is doing it. And if they're learning and having fun with it, that's the whole point.
Right.
The thing is that we have a couple people who are known to be, how do you pronounce it?
Curmudgeons.
And
I was going to say S-disturbers, but yes, go ahead.
That's just what they do.
Okay.
That is sort of their shtick, and I don't know about you, but long ago I got used to it. It's like there are a couple of people that I know specifically, and you know exactly who I'm thinking about, who are going to come up with responses like that, and we have long ago become inured to it. But a newcomer might not. So
that's my.
That is kind of a problem.
Like some of the razzing that they gave the 8-bit guy because he spray painted his CoCo and he was using oven cleaner and whatever else. I mean,
why?
Why are you razzing him about it? Like, why is that a bad thing? It worked for him. Well, it matters.
The reasons I was critical about some of the things he did is he, especially when he took a screwdriver to remove that label, because he actually ruined that label, and there's. Some of the other things, there's better techniques he could have used, and he kind of went back to say, well, this is kind of, I do this for entertainment, but he was actually giving out information instead of entertainment, and I wasn't hating him on his character or anything like that. I was just I was critical about some of the techniques that he was using.
Yeah, but as he pointed out, I mean, sometimes when you do the research on the web, if you've never done it before, some of those other website stuff were recommending some of the techniques he was doing, and then other ones are saying not. It's just like anything else on the net. You can find 15 people that agree and 15 people that don't. I think the fact that he put the effort in trying to restore it and shared, what he did and what he learned, and maybe this didn't work out as well as he had hoped or whatever, I think was the learning experience. I don't think he's recommending that everybody else try to do it this way. And I mean, if you have a better way to do it, Richard, maybe you should make a video and put it up as well, saying, here's a better technique and this is why it's better, and kind of like help the community that way.
Pros and cons to doing certain things.
I've had a lot of experiences where what I get out of it is, let me explain to you from my experience how not to do this.
That's my area of expertise.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I got my Christmas lights. The first year I did it, I put them up with double-sided sticky tape in the front windows, and that worked really, really well until it was time to take them down. At which point, I broke one of my front windows, and that stayed with me for a good long a number of months during the during the winter, which in Minneapolis area is not a good thing.
Yeah, but the other thing I was getting on, it wasn't that I was hating it, but it was the case he was using was a first generation CoCo 1 case, which he probably didn't know that, but it was just like you need to me it was just, if you're going to do something like that, try to be at least a little bit more careful, I guess. But also he was talking about preserving history, and again, it was just a technique or just some people when they refurb something is you hear this a lot in if you watch like that PBS show where they bring the stuff up and they appraise the items, antiques.
The roadshow.
The antique roadshow. Yeah, and so they tell them, they mention, say, oh yeah, we had this refurbished. We had a new lacquer put on, we had new artwork put on.
Right.
And they said, well, you just like erased a lot of value on this, and that was one of the things you should consider when you start doing stuff like this. I mean, the problem is, especially with older machines, they're not making these anymore, and they're becoming fewer and fewer, and it's getting to the point of we're going from vintage to museum pieces. And not saying every single computer is a museum piece and we should treat it like a museum piece, but it's just some of those things we need to consider when you start modifying stuff like that.
Yeah, well, I think it goes to whether it's a restore or refurbish too. Because I mean, if he was just trying to make it look nice again and close to what the original, he wasn't, I don't think, so concerned with trying to do it with like the stock paint they used back then. And
right.
And yeah, he had a different goal. I think he's not doing it as a collector per se. He just wants it to look good as presentable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's exactly it. It's up to the person whether he wants to actually restore it or just make it to what he wants.
Yeah, but when he was saying that, there was a history behind this. This was a power user. Basically, when he painted over it, all those paw marks, where the guy typed on it, that was all erased. And of course, then when he threw away the box, or he said he threw away the box, there was this, you never throw away a box, no matter what condition it is, because sometimes you can actually restore those, or you can take measurements, or you can document those things. And there's people that will save those boxes no matter what condition they are.
Oh,
yeah, I mean,
true.
He's describing it as being moldy and stuff, and in that case, I would have thrown it out too, because it could be a health issue. I mean,
right.
So it's like doing CoCo modifications of any sort. It's up to the individual, I think.
Sure.
Because what you're comfortable with and what he's comfortable with, obviously, are two different things.
Right. I actually, speaking of painting, I like the discussion of maybe taking some CoCos and doing the Darth Vader CoCo, where you've got a fully black CoCo. I think that's kind of cool. And then if you want to get into some mods, I wouldn't mind a black CoCo with some cool LED effects on it, maybe even a breathing sound at that point.
Your Alienware CoCo box.
You don't know the power of the 6809.
Except you have to do the sounds.
Yeah, but and the other thing is, I don't mind people. If people should use computers to their full potential, and I see no no problem with modifying or modding any of the computers. I mean, I do it, I do it on my computers all the time, but sometimes there are just a few machines like that reversion C board that I got, or CoCo 1, that will never get modified. I have a CoCo 3 that I received it. It's in mint condition. As a matter of fact, the label that they put, the protective label that they put on when you first buy them, is still on that one, and it still has the new electronic smell, even after 35 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I am never going to touch that one. That one is...
Actually, Richard, you mentioned the CoCo 3, or the CoCo C board, and I've never actually seen one of those. I had heard if you had gotten out into the wild. Have you put pictures of that up anywhere? I'd really like to see that.
Yeah, I would really like to see that myself.
I posted a couple of them, but I'll do a whole bunch of them, because also the CPU does not have the 6809 markings. It has the internal Motorola number.
Is that the one that I sold? That's the one I sold you, right?
The
yes.
1000 some series. Yeah, I remember that, Richard.
Right, and then there's also a ton of internal factory mods that are on that thing too. So,
yeah, no, I'd really like to see. I do remember hearing about them, and I have met, like, Lee Veal had the D board number 1 serial number, which is the first one that came off the line. So I was surprised that they actually had some C boards out, because obviously that was an earlier revision.
Right. Well, probably what happened was the C board, it might have accidentally gone out, but a lot of times what will happen is a board will, if it gets rejected, it goes into the tech area, it gets repaired, and then it usually goes back into the production and reintroduced so they can ship it out. And that might have happened with this particular machine. But this particular machine was, I have a date stamp on it. It was September 20th, I believe, 1980. Is its internal stamp on it.
Okay. Yeah, definitely let us know when you get everything posted up on that, because I would definitely like to see that. I've never actually seen a C board in the wild.
Right. I've never seen one at all.
Yeah. This one is a 16K. It was a 4K originally, but it's a 16K, and also the 16K chips are NEC chips, but they have the Tandy logo relabel on them.
Interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not shooting myself every day. I think about the fact I sold you that rare museum quality CoCo now either. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting topic, and I think definitely the CoCo is in the eye of the beholder. I think there's something to be said too when you start talking about, well, if we're going to make a new CoCo, when does it stop becoming a CoCo? Well, technically, it stopped becoming a CoCo the minute you made something new, because it's not really a CoCo. If it's an FPGA and it's, or the CoCo on the chip, the Roger Taylor thing, whatever it is, it technically never was a CoCo, because it's a modern reimagining of the CoCo. It's a CoCo-inspired new device. To me, one of those devices, as long as it's 100% backwards compatible with original CoCo software, you can't expect it to run all the peripherals, but if it's 100% compatible with the Gimp and the sound and all that kind of stuff, and it can run all that software, and it's basically, hardware-based emulation, and you maintain that as a core, so you have a core CoCo compatibility component. Anything else you add on top of that is kind of a bonus feature that you could either choose to like or not like, or use or not use. But again, you were talking about preserving things, and there aren't going to be, CoCos won't be around forever. So if somebody wants to get one, and CoCo 3s are hard to get a hand on right now, so they're not as common on eBay. They tend to sell, go up to about $300. Maybe not everybody wants to drop $300 on an old CoCo 3, or maybe they want to and they can't afford to. So what's another option? Well, we do have the Raspberry Pi as an option, the CoCo 3 Pi, which you can get for $50, and I haven't seen it yet, but I'm going to get one, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how that works now with the Speech Sound Pack. And then you have all these other projects that are making new and improved CoCo-esque type devices. Is that too much? Well, I guess it depends on who's doing it. Not everybody's going to buy it, but for the people who are buying it, they probably think it's cool. I know, Bill Noble, you're heavily involved in working on, that stuff right now. And do you think it's too much? Or, you've got some history with the CoCo?
that's in, kind of the thing where it kind of transitions. Like the FPGA stuff, yeah, it's new CoCo. It's not old CoCo.
Right.
Whereas the actual CoCo itself died when Tandy stopped making it.
Okay, Richard.
Take care, Richard.
Yeah, the CoCo died when the CoCo stopped being made from Tandy.
Right.
So now what we're coming up with these FPGAs is new CoCo. It's not the old CoCo. Yes, it's compatible, but not the original.
Mm-hmm. Right. And like, so what would it roughly cost right now if somebody wanted to buy a CoCo FPGA or the CoCo on a chip? What's the out of pocket expense to get that system and all the parts and pieces needed?
I'm not sure about Gary's version, Gary Becker's version, but I know with Roger's version, it's going to cost you about $230 roughly.
Okay.
With Gary's version, it's roughly around the same area, but I see on his posts on the blog and everything like that things aren't quite the same, but they're getting there.
Okay. And some people might view that as maybe too much to spend on a new thing that's not maybe that important. But again, this is a hobby. This is a special interest situation. It's, we're all a certain kind of crazy, a special kind of crazy to want to use any kind of CoCo, a new CoCo, a real CoCo, an emulated CoCo, a reimagined CoCo. There's a certain group of people who find this interesting regardless. So it's kind of, I look at it as being kind of hypocritical to even pass judgment about this, because how you want to use your 35-year-old weird thing from the past is your kind of crazy, because anybody else who's not into this is going to think we're all crazy. So, you can't sit here and say, well, because I'm running Nitrous 9 and I'm running an operating system and I'm running programs, well, I'm doing CoCo a legitimate way. There is really no true legitimate way to do this old crazy stuff we're doing. We're doing our flavor of crazy, I think, So
and like Richard said, like he likes restoring computers to to have them as something that's worth money because it's and worthy of history because it's the original and whatever else. My CoCos are all in use. I use them for programming and development and sometimes playing games, whatever else. I could care less if the case is yellowed, and both of mine are. Right. It doesn't matter to me at all. It's got a 6309 and 8 meg RAM. That's what matters to me.
Right. What is it doing?
It makes my development easier. So it just totally depends on what you're into.
Well,
I also just it, Curtis. Like I actually still use the CoCo 3 you gave me, in actually developing a lot of the stuff for the FPGA. Believe it or not.
I have nothing wrong with people doing that. As a matter of fact, the stuff that I do restore is like I have a bunch of CoCo 2s, and I'm actually going through and I'm removing and recapping them, and I'm also taking out some of the sockets because they were the single DIN ones, and also putting 6309s in there as well. So and because I want to make them useful. I mean, I don't want to put them on a pedestal where people just worship them. I want them to be used, and I also am probably going to add like the composite mod on there as well.
Yeah, and then on, like you said before, like your C-board, that's a rarity. I mean, that is a collection piece, so that one you're going to leave unmodified. Right. And both approaches are right. I mean, if somebody else had the C-board, then they're going to I want to see if I can hack this thing to actually handle 64K because I heard that was really hard. It just depends on the person, and no answer is wrong.
Right. There never is a wrong answer.
Right. It's
there's the saying that I said once before is you get two people in the same room, you get three different opinions.
Well, all of us like to use our computers our own way, and that's one of the appeals to the CoCo. Back when I was a teen, I drilled a little hole, put a switch in it, like I said in the side panel, and put in a switch to attach to the halt line, so I could pause games, walk away when my parents made me stop, and then I'd come back and flip the switch and go back to right where I left off without having to shut the machine off. And when I got the first XT keyboard interface, I drilled a hole in the side, put the little mount, and I could just plug the keyboard straight into the side of the CoCo. Was that a good thing? For collection-wise, no, but that was in the early 90s. So
that's
most
the hacker
people,
mode as opposed to the collector mode.
That wasn't the appeal. It was the usability.
Sure.
Modify it, make it usable. So,
yep. Hey, if anybody went to the CoCo Fest back in the 90s, if you remember Frank Swagger, he had his CoCo with a built-in little 5-inch color screen and a big wooden panel case he had handmade, and it was a portable CoCo with a couple of drives. He would just lug it around with a little handle and plug it in.
CoCo Luggable, that's kind of cool.
I remember that one.
Yeah,
that is awesome. Yeah.
Now, if you're a collector, that's an abomination.
Sure.
It looked homemade. It did not look like a professional job, but it did what he wanted. He wanted something portable with a screen built in, drives built in. It was like an Osborne.
Yeah, somebody did. It was last year at CoCo Fest during the auction. I forgot what it was, but it was something like a cassette deck or a stereo receiver component or something that had been made into the CoCo was made into that component type thing too. So the front of it looked like a cassette player or a preamp or a stereo tuner or something, but it was a CoCo.
Yeah, and there was tons of PC pack the
repacks
cases and stuff.
Yeah. And that was a topic on the podcast too about repacking too, which is interesting. I am in favor of leaning more towards the keep it as stock as possible, but I would be open to having a little bit of both. If you're able to, I am receptive to definitely the Raspberry Pi project because it's fiscally more practical, to spend $50 on something I don't need right now because, again, I've got real CoCos and I can emulate this. So do I need a Raspberry Pi? Absolutely not. But is it cool? Absolutely, right? So I'm looking forward to trying the Raspberry Pi. I don't know if I would jump into the deep end of the special kind of crazy pool to get a CoCo on a chip, but maybe. You just never know. I've seen some really cool screenshots of like Alan Huffman showing the different scan lines on the things and recreating what the RGB monochrome screens look like and all kinds of cool stuff like that. So there's definitely some cool factors to it. It's just like any other project. I don't think any of them are trying to get rich in it. They're spending a lot of time and energy creating something for the love of this machine and for the love of their project. And there's definitely people who are interested in it and they're supporting it and stuff like that. So,
well, that's just it, Steve. Both Gary and Roger are doing this totally for non-profit. They're not doing any of this for profit. They're just trying to keep it going.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's definitely nothing wrong with that. So, it's cool. It's cool. The fact that we're still here talking about the CoCo 35 years later, the fact that we've been doing this weekly talk now this is now number 11. We've been talking about this we've been doing this 12 weeks now. We still have people watching us right now. How many people are watching us right now? We have, I don't know. How many? 9 people. We were up and down between dozen and a half people. We got 9 people watching us right now, and these things get like 100 views. There's people still interested in this, and so I think there's enough of us to keep the dream alive, keep the CoCo alive in our hearts, in our minds, and whenever possible in our homes and things like that. So it's just cool. If you're a fan of the CoCo, there's no such thing as too much, right? It's just like cowbell. I gotta have more cowbell, It's just I gotta have more CoCo. Would it be cool to see this new Gimme? Yeah.
Yes.
Ed Slider's new Gimme.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Is that too much? I don't think so because that is an actual piece of hardware you're sticking into your actual CoCo. So you plug in a new Gimme, and if it happens to be a Keurig machine and it happens to be a garage door opener, and and it streams Netflix, hey, more power to us, So it's all good. So I'd be looking forward to a new Gimme chip that slices, dices, and juliennes. Throwing a bamboo steamer on the side and call it a day.
I'd like to also see a option for maybe where you've got CoCo 3 that might have a damaged logic board, maybe an option to maybe get a few reproductions of the boards made, just to keep, if you've got an original case, you got everything else, but your board's damaged. It'd be nice to be able to just replace the board, stick the Gimme in it, and everything else.
You know what? That actually is a very good idea, David.
Oh, and it came from David even too, which makes it even more interesting.
Yeah.
Anyway, John, you were about to say something?
Yes, the fact that the core the psychoactive core can go on a Godil board and plug into the CoCo. Is also a very interesting prospect.
Yeah, Eric brought that up.
Say that again, because I didn't understand a word you just said.
They make a small board that has just the CPU on it, basically, and a field programmer gateway. But there's also a version of that, which is hard to get because they don't produce that many of them, that you can have it programmed as the 6809, plus it has a debugger channel on it. So you can actually put single steps in the hardware on a CoCo. So it becomes a hardware ICE, in-circuit emulator for you on the CoCo for testing things out. That's on one of my wants lists.
Ed Snyder says the prototype is nearly done of his new Gimme, and I'm just asking him if Netflix streaming is built into that yet. So that might be round 2. No, that's cool. It's just cool that there's so many things that we can do to add on to what makes a CoCo. I think I had asked this question a while ago. Maybe it was in the Facebook group or other things like that. But because we have like things like MAME and MES, and we have the ability to emulate all these different systems. What if somebody just designed the supercomputer that has all these things emulated into one master system that's got one of every chip, where we've got a Gimme chip and a 6809, and we've got a 6502, and we've got the Atari Pokey chip, and we've got this and we've got that, and we just make this imaginary super emulated system that has one of everything, and we just write, what if there was one computer that had no limits, but it was all period appropriate, and we had all the different chips, that the best of everything, and we design a new super system? What would that be like, and how cool would it be to maybe develop some software for that? And that's probably a huge, big pie in the sky type thing. But
that sounds like one ring to rule them all. One ring to, something that looks good but turns evil. Takes over our souls and turns us into wraiths.
Yeah, right.
My precious.
Systems.
Yeah, it's called the Forbin Project. If you remember that movie.
I do.
Which project?
The Forbin.
Okay. Yeah, and Darren Grant just chimed in. Hello, Darren, Mr. Tandy himself. And how do you pronounce Eric's name? Is it Gavriluk?
Yes,
I
believe so, yeah.
And Darren mentioned that Eric has been promoting the idea of a drop-in motherboard for a while. So if you want to develop something, why not make just a generic motherboard where everything is either slot or socket capable, and then just develop away and have a standard kind of hardware development platform.
Add a sound chip while you're at it.
Add a sound chip while you're at it. Right. So yeah.
Well, the cool,
whether it be the AY or the 7. What is it? 7, and I'm not sure the part number on that one, but John would chime in on that.
I'd have to look it up. It's this big long number. It's 76 490.
BR549.
Alpha Romeo Charlie.
Whiskey Tango Foxtrot over.
Yeah, or Alpha Charlie 8 Mike Lima. That happens to be my call letters, but there is some systems out there that emulate multiple systems. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's always a possibility. There's been talk about getting the CoCo ported to that. Some field programmer gate array systems do use a serial EEPROM to load the system in at start. So I could foresee a possibility to have multiple systems programmed that you just throw a switch on startup and it start up in the version that you want it to. Not cheap items.
Right,
but,
right.
It's definitely a doable possibility of somebody the right smarts.
Well, you just made me think of something too, because we're talking about how the CoCo FPGA, the cost of that is about $200, and there's no profit involved in it. That's just what it costs to buy the parts. I don't remember the name of the product, but there is a Nintendo clone out there that's selling for $500. It's all FPGA based, where they basically cloned all the chips through FPGA, and it's a luxury, really nice fancy Nintendo clone thing, but it's selling for $500. It's like the Rolls Royce of, hacked retro systems. And then Darren Grant just chimed in. It's the SN76496 sound generator. This is one that John's using on his cartridge. There you go. SN76496. There you go. It's a BR549. Hike. Hut. So, I guess the FPGA is not always going to make things super cost effective, but it seems like it is this universal hardware magic box that can become anything, like say one ring to rule them all. It's cool stuff. There are lots of options, but we'll probably let's start to plan on winding down this show for today, because my stomach's telling me it's time to grab my sub sandwich that's in the fridge out there. I think the last thing that I was thinking about talking about, which we can save for another time unless it's something that doesn't require a great depth of time, but there was the topic of assembly language versus machine code that had come up this week in the mailing list and on the Facebook group, and how the actual machine code is a bunch of hex symbols that the processor reads, but when we type in a statement in assembly, we're typing in a shorthand. Assembly is shorthand for machine code, and the CPU actually reads machine code. Is that a quick synopsis of it?
Yeah, it's not necessarily hex code in the machine. It's actually just on and off lines.
Yeah, it's binary.
Straight up binary. CPU is binary.
It's binary, which we translate oftentimes to hex code because hex is a little easier to read.
Right, human readable.
It's basically into the CoCo. Now, in some processors, you probably want to do octal because you can see where the instruction sets are broke down a little bit better. But hex works well with the 6809 because way the things are set up in the thing. I still remember some of the hex codes, like 86.
Low
day, yeah. And see, he remembers even.
Or stream 1080 for load X.
Yeah, and so you do those things, you learn some of those, but it's, the difference between assembly and machine language to me is mute in most cases. Now, the difference is that you can go and do some other things assembly. You start doing the macros and things like that, which can be, a step above the machine language. I remember it was one of the guys who did at the CoCo Fest. He says, I never use a assembler. The guy wrote one of the, I think it was 256 basic or something for the CoCo or something like that. So I always just poke into machine language. Well, he learned those enough that he assembled it in his head,
Oh, wow.
And created it. And so, there's always those exceptional, quirky geniuses that happen.
Was his name by any chance Rain Man?
And so, so there's that. Assembly language is a great way to put it there, but you get it some extra features to make them more readable.
Yeah, I mean, like trying to calculate like branch offsets or something like that. It always confuse me because they're signed and.
Doing that by hands without symbols.
It's so much easier.
Do you remember how much trouble we had with that, Curtis? With Nitrous 9?
The 6309, because we didn't have an assembler. We hadn't written one yet, so we were doing all of Nitrous 9 was hand assembly. Yeah, that was fun.
And so you have those, but the assembler adds some extra features, and that's a feature of the assembler, not the assembly language, so to speak, because the assembly language matches, it's a one-to-one correspondence, the machine language.
Okay.
Now the assembler may do some things, and some common things in the assembler is to be able to use symbols, and labels. And then this steps it back off because then the assembler figures these things out instead of you do it. Because you can have an assembler that doesn't, use labels, are symbols. And, which possibly could be in something like a debugger. And you'd be able to, enter a assembly command, and it calculate it, but without using those features. So originate addresses, symbols, labels are something that's not necessarily assembly language itself. These are tools or parts of the assembler to make it easier for you to develop for it and to take away some of the work. But the actual assembly language, again, it's a one-to-one correspondence.
Is the difference, though, that in assembly it would be something that resembles slightly closer to English than just the actual hex code itself?
Yes.
Yeah, like a lot of times it is. Sometimes it's not. It doesn't really make, sense. But oftentimes those are chose to make sense if you know the processor.
That
it kind of makes a sense. And the Motorola's and the early 8-bits, a lot of times made a lot of, kind of sense once you knew what they were doing. But those could vary drastically from different machines. The 6502, the 6809s, those were similar. If you haven't done a Z80, you step over to that. Some of those instructions really don't make a sense, until you study it. If you do something like the RCA Cosmic, the 1802, you've got another set of instructions, and until you know what it does behind those abbreviations, really don't make a lot of sense to you.
Mm-hmm.
But once you learn the processor enough, they're called a mnemonics for a reason. A mnemonic is not abbreviation.
Right, okay? It's a word that means something else.
Yeah, it's a memory tool to match something else. And so, yes, they are abbreviations by the strict sense of the word, but they're mnemonics because in most cases they're designed, a set of letters to remind you what the function does. Okay.
Which in reality get converted to the actual machine core.
Right. And at the end of the day, the processor really only processes binary, right? It's processing zeros and ones. It's an 8-bit processor. It's processing 8 zeros and ones each cycle.
Or multiple cycles to process it. But it's you have a load cycle and such.
No, it's definitely cool stuff. Maybe we can figure out a way to show that visually at some point in time in the future. There's actually two more things I do want to talk about, though, too, because I think when we talked to Sockmaster last week, that was after our CoCo Talk, right? Sockmaster was on Sunday, if I'm not mistaken.
That was Sunday, yeah.
Yeah, so I think we had the Sockmaster discussion after our last CoCo Talk. Hold on, now Darren Grant is chiming into the chat here. It says, at college I attended, we learned to program on an Intel 8080 microcomputer trainer. It just had a hex keypad and a 7-segment LED display. Had to use an instruction set reference sheet to look up the hex codes. I still remember DB is the move immediate instruction for some reason. So that's kind of cool.
I have to agree with that too, Steve, because I first learned machine code on 1802.
Oh, wow.
And then you get different CPUs that are actually don't have registers per se, like some of the old HP ones that were stack based. Everything you did, math, commands, jump, something else is all stack based.
Yeah. I think it's probably worth just reiterating the fact that we had a really good session with John Kowalski and Sockmaster talking about Donkey Kong Remix last weekend, and that's just, I think, one of the many cool things that is cool about our community, and I think some of the fringe benefits that's come when we created this Skype call to do CoCo Talk. One of the fringe benefits was, Rick Adams getting back into working on Bomb Threat. That was unexpected, nice bonus thing here. Having Sockmaster chime in every now and then, just in the text chat. He was chiming in one time. I remember one evening, Sockmaster and Nick and we were just chatting back and forth for a while, and we ended up looking at his Donkey Kong Jr. remix on YouTube, and he was just talking at length about that and everything else, and we were able to ask him questions. And then it was like Sunday morning, he mentions, I don't remember how we got on the topic of Donkey Kong Remix, but I just kind of said, well, heck, if we're going to do a video, would you mind talking about it too? Because it'd be great to hear it from the source. And we just it just happened spontaneously. We planned it, we did it, and it was a really good video to number one, listen to him talk about that process. What was it like to disassemble Donkey Kong? What was it like to port Donkey Kong to the CoCo, and what were the challenges and all these other things? And then to take that, which was already impressive, but then to make a whole new version, a reimagining of Donkey Kong in this Donkey Kong remix. It's really impressive, and by playing the game, you really have an appreciation for not only the game and the mechanics, but everything he had to do to make this new version of the game. And so it was a pretty cool experience, I felt, for me. For number one, it's very rarely I play a game that long without sucking at it. And then number two, just having John there, John Kowalski, talking about it, and then having Curtis asking a lot of good value-added questions about, the competitive aspects of Donkey Kong and everything else. I feel it was a very good interview and a good video, and it was a good opportunity to capture this information for everyone else. And I think the feedback now to that video and that interview has been pretty positive, but I was kind of alarmed to hear that when Donkey Kong Remix first hit the scene, it was not necessarily well received, and I think that came up in the discussions as well, and that kind of blew my mind. I'll shut up on that now. Can't hear you, Curtis.
Great. The fact that Donkey Kong wasn't that popular to start, I think, is because a lot of people didn't believe it was real. Like when you put the video up, a lot of people going, that was MAME. That wasn't a CoCo. You're lying.
Yeah, it wasn't real. It was a duplicate.
Yeah. And then some people only had 128K and they didn't have 512K, so they said, you can't prove it to me that it runs because it won't run on my machine. It's just ridiculous how silly it was getting.
Were some of these people these curmudgeons I've heard of?
Yeah, but they were other platform curmudgeons at that time.
Oh yeah. Oh, even worse, huh? Outside haters and naysayers, huh? But yeah, I thought that was a nice. I think that was great to really kind of capture that whole discussion about that project and that process, and really take a little bit longer look at the game, because I had never seen the game that long, because prior to that I never got past the first level with those weird little ramps coming in towards the center. It's a wicked hard game.
That's just it, Steve. John let us in on a couple of good get-arounds on some of the levels.
yeah. So that was kind of cool. So I think that's just worth mentioning too, because that happened after our last talk, and that was another nice little thing that happened this week in CoCo. And then one more thing too, I do want to pull up the Tandy Assembly site, and by the way, I haven't made my reservations, but I'm definitely going, and I'm going to carpool with Michael Brandt. I'm going to drive up to Orlando, and we're going to drive together. It's going to be like a 12-hour drive for us. So we're going to go. We're going to split the cost. So we'll split the rental car, we'll split the gas, we'll split the hotel. So it should be, a manageable trip for us. But they now have when you click on the exhibitors page now, they've actually got the layout now. And so right now they've got 26 different tables arranged here, which is pretty cool. It's a nice layout. It reminds me of CoCo Fest quite a bit. And then right outside that room there is the speaking room here. So it's in a separate room, but it looks like it's right next door. Again, similar to CoCo Fest, but this looks like a pretty nice arrangement for the speaking room as well. When you look at the schedule, and so let's look at the speakers too, because we got a few more people confirmed now. So now we have Scott Adams of Adventure Game fame. We have Don French telling the story of making of the TRS-80, and then Lance is it Miklas?
Miklas. Oh, cool! I didn't know he was there.
From bank robbers to Facebook. So we've got some good speaking things coming on right now. When you look at the schedule, what I like about this too as well is that right now these talks are not back to back. And so if I had any one complaint about CoCo Fest is that these talks were never ending. It'd be nice to have a break in between them so you could spend some time back in the exhibitor area and things like that. So it's like there's a morning one and there's an after lunch one right now, so it is kind of broken up. So Scott Adams will be kicking off Sunday. The keynote will be kicked off Saturday by Don French. So there are things, coming through now. The website's looking good, seeing what this area is like. I'm barring unusual circumstances, I am going to be at Tandy Assembly. And that was another conversation that came up in Facebook was, somebody says, well, I'd like to get there, but, I can't get there till I retire, and, it's like, I threw out my little comment that, it's, you got enough time to figure out a way to make this happen. That's just my opinion, not to poo-poo on anybody else. But yeah, when you have an event that's only once a year, you've pretty much got 364 days to plan how you're going to get there and figure out the finances and the transportation, things like that. Talking about CoCo Fest, and so, same thing of Tandy Assembly. I think this is a good way to give our community an extra shot of vitamin C and B12. Have another event, so 2 events per year we can possibly go to. This is a little bit broader spectrum, but still kind of focused thing, because it's not just CoCo, but it's all things Radio Shack. So we should still have some common interests and have a lot of friends and a lot of camaraderie there. And it's the first event, so I'm in favor of supporting this event and hoping to make it successful and successful enough where we can have future Tandy Assemblies as well. So that's kind of my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's a matter of scheduling for work. And I mean, back when CoCo Fest switched to be an earlier run, was at the end of March, beginning of April, I was in the middle of one of my 2 rush seasons of work. I didn't make a CoCo Fest for 15 years because of that. Once they moved it back into late April, early May, I could start attending again. And unfortunately, Tandy Assembly is at the tail end of my other rush season, so I won't be able to make it given those dates. It's not a money issue. I can't.
Yeah, just
get away
work
from
schedule. Right, I get it. Yeah.
Well, I want to say that I am planning to be there.
Good.
However, my sister might have some different ideas. She's planning to get married sometime in October, but she hasn't.
No, she has plenty of time to reschedule that around Tandy Assembly.
Yeah, Bill tried that with his brother. It didn't work.
Yeah, I don't think that'll work.
Priorities, people.
I had that same problem with my brother.
Yeah. So
whatever gave him the idea to get married, the weekend of CoCo Fest. I mean, come on. Or make it a joint event. It's CoCo Fest /wedding. Mazel tov. So no, that's cool.
Well, we might as well have a wedding. We had a wake at one.
A wake at a CoCo Fest?
Yeah.
For a CoCo or for a person?
For a CoCo.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to Tandy Assembly. I wish them all the luck in the world to have this inaugural event kick off and be successful. I'm definitely going to do what I can try to do to support it and promote it, and definitely attend. There's so many things you want to do, and again, we have the challenge of time. We have our careers, we have our lives, we have our families, so we have to manage our time and our finances and our things like that. But I would love to go to all these, VCF Midwest and Mid East and South North and in East Pacific and all these other events and the Southern Fried Gaming Expo. There's so many events that are out there. I can't afford to go to them all, so let me be Pacific and choose the ones that are nearest and dearest to me. So yeah, CoCo Fest would definitely be on top of that list. Tandy Assembly now too. I mean, I'm a former Radio Shack employee. I owned CoCos, I owned Tandy 1000s, so it's near and dear to me. So I have a much more vested interest, a much more stronger emotional connection to these events, as well as just wanting to support our community members who are trying to do this too. So these are going to be high on my list and high on my priority. Grant says I'm planning on attending as well with his Tandy 1000 TL2 was his first non-CoCo computer. Okay, Richard says I'm going to be there too. Very cool. So yeah. So it'd be kind of cool for us to represent.
It's not a matter of not wanting to go. It's just
we would love that. We would love to have you. One thing I don't see on there right now is the time slot for the Tandy Assembly Jam, and it's not going to be a jam without Curtis Boyle on his guitar. But you could
try with Skype.
Yeah. So maybe if we can get Alan Huffman to show up or somebody else. Because that was to me that was another cool fringe benefit of coming to CoCo Fest, was doing this rock and roll jam, something you don't expect to happen at a nerd convention, So
that's been going on for decades. I mean, in the 90s.
Yeah, that's awesome. So so hopefully we can still manage to do our first ever Tandy Assembly jam session somehow. So yeah, but yeah, we'll live stream it. Oh, I got a new laptop too. So I've ordered a new laptop. I have it. So I have a very high-end, very high-capable laptop. So streaming future live events will be much more on par with what I'm doing with my desktop computer now too. I mean, this is a gaming laptop. It's got an i7 processor, high-end graphics chip. USB 3.0 connections and all that kind of stuff. So I can do now on the road what I do from home. So future live streams will be definitely a higher caliber production and stuff too. That was my biggest disappointment of CoCo Fest, was that my computer could barely handle driving the stream, and I want to have multiple cameras so we can zoom in on the slideshows and all that kind of stuff. So look forward to a much better live stream from Tandy Assembly too.
But it's still a Windows-based machine.
It's still a Windows-based machine, yes. Yeah, I'm not going to put OS 9 on it.
Why not, Steve?
It'd be a big improvement.
All right, so I'm done running my big fat mouth. Anybody got anything they want to close with before we get out of here? Because my stomach's killing me right now. So.
Now I think I'm all good.
All right. Nick Marentes, thank you for being here, sir. We appreciate you. And Rick Adams as well, thank you for being here. And Bill Noble and Bruce Moore from Canada, and Curtis Boyle in his lovely salmon-colored shirt he's wearing today. David Ladd, looking lovely as always. John Strong, appreciate all the stuff you do for us, and even especially when I remember your name. And Richard Lorbieski, did I get your name right, Richard?
Yes, you did.
All right, good. I'm getting good at this.
I see you haven't lost your crypt card.
First time Steve got that right.
It's up on the screen here too, so I'm looking at it. It says John Strong right under his name, so I do have some cheat sheets with me. So.
Did you see the pronunciation guide? Now you'll be all set.
Yes.
In case you all missed it, I picked on him because I wasn't mentioned last Sunday. So that's what it's all about here.
That's what we.
Yeah, his response was, "Who are you?"
We're good at picking on each other here, so that's a good thing. All right, thank you guys.
I know.
Except for David Ladd, who we have the utmost respect for. Grant,
personality, Dave.
Grant, we're glad to hear you're recovering. Fedor, thank you for being here. Ed Snyder, thank you for being here in chat. Thank you for Ron Klein for stopping by earlier. And everybody else who was in the chat. Alan Zeiser was in the chat earlier. And gosh, there's so much chat going on here. I got to make sure I capture all this too. Yes, so there was a lot of discussion. So I want to thank everybody who watched. Darren Grant, Mr. Tandy himself, thank you for being here. And we're going to end this week's CoCo Talk. We got plenty of more to talk. Echo Gamer just came in, and okay, whatever. All right, guys. So we're done. Thank you for watching. We'll see you all next week on CoCo Talk, and we might even have some speech sound pack emulation to display for you tomorrow. So stay tuned for that. Take care.
Woo-hoo.
CoCo forever. Hashtag because CoCo.
Go CoCo Nation.
Go CoCo Nation.
CoCo forever.
Bye now.